Welcome to Sleepy Stories. In this episode, we will take a clear and steady look at life on a restless planet, a world that has never truly been still. The purpose of this story is simple: to help you learn while you rest. If sleep does not come right away, that is completely fine. You can stay with the calm flow of ideas and let the scientific details settle gently in your mind. You may even find that understanding brings its own kind of quiet. And if you enjoy these peaceful explorations, you are warmly invited to like and subscribe so more listeners can find their way here. For now, allow your breathing to slow, soften your shoulders, and let the rhythm of the words carry you at an easy pace. Earth is often described as a home, a place of stability beneath our feet, a world of familiar landscapes and dependable cycles. Yet when we step back and look across the immense expanse of geological time, a different picture emerges. Stability is not Earth's natural state. Motion is. From its earliest moments, the planet has been shaped by currents of energy both inside and around it. What feels solid beneath us is a temporary expression of forces that have shifted, collided, stretched, and rebuilt the surface again and again. Even the continents, which seem permanent and immovable to the human eye, drift slowly across the planet's surface. They separate and reconnect over millions of years, altering oceans and climates as they move. Mountains rise where plates collide, only to be worn down grain by wind, water, and time. Volcanoes release heat from deep within. Earthquakes ripple through crust that is always under tension. The surface, we know, is a momentary pause in a long sequence of transformations. This restlessness is not chaotic. It follows physical laws that govern the movement of heat, rock, water, and air. Energy flows from places of high concentration to low concentration. Material responds to pressure, temperature, and gravity. Over long periods, these processes produce patterns. They repeat, but never in exactly the same way. Earth is predictable in the sense that it will always change, even if the timing and shape of each change unfold slowly. Life emerged within this shifting environment, not after it calmed. Long before ecosystems stabilized, before continents held their shape, early forms of life were learning to survive in conditions that were far from gentle. Temperatures fluctuated, chemical compositions varied from place to place. Light reached the surface unevenly. Yet these challenges did not prevent life from forming. They shaped the very mechanisms that allowed it to begin. Adaptation became part of life's foundation, not an added requirement. Even now, every quiet landscape carries the memory of past motion. A calm valley may once have been the floor of an ancient sea. A rolling plain may have formed from layers of volcanic ash. A coastline that appears eternal is slowly shifting with each tide, storm, and change in sea level. When we recognize this, Earth becomes something different, not a fixed stage on which life plays out, but a dynamic partner in the story of life. It is always adjusting, always responding to energy within and around it. Rest, in this context, does not mean stillness. It means finding comfort in the rhythm of a moving world. Just as the planet balances change over vast spans of time, you can allow your thoughts to move at their own quiet pace, without pressure to reach any conclusion. If your mind drifts, that is natural. Earth drifts too, slowly and steadily, carrying oceans, continents, and life across a journey that has no final destination. And as you listen, you may feel a growing sense of ease. The planet does not resist change. It absorbs it, reshapes it, and continues. In that long, steady movement, there is room for calm. In the beginning, there was no calm surface waiting to welcome oceans or life. The young Earth formed in a crowded region of space where fragments of rock and metal moved along intersecting paths, colliding again and again. Each impact released intense heat, adding energy to a growing world that remained molten for long stretches of time. The surface did not cool into stability. It melted, hardened, and melted again as new collisions stirred its interior. What would one day become continents existed only as drifting materials, reshaped continuously by the forces surrounding them. As the planet grew, gravity sorted its components. Heavier materials sank toward the center, forming a dense core. Lighter materials rose and formed layers above it. This separation released even more heat, keeping the surface unstable. At this stage, Earth glowed with stored energy. Nothing was solid in the way we understand solidity today. Yet this process was essential. Without the core, the planet could not generate a magnetic field. Without the layers, it could not create the dynamic surface needed for oceans, mountains, and eventually life. Over immense spans of time, Earth began to lose heat to space. The outermost layer cooled first, allowing thin patches of crust to appear. These patches were fragile, cracked easily, and remelted whenever fresh impacts struck. But slowly, the intervals between major collisions increased, not because the planet had become safe, but because the surrounding space had grown less crowded. With each long pause, the surface had time to harden slightly before being disturbed once more. A pattern of partial cooling and renewed heating continued until the crust finally persisted long enough to become a recognizable surface. Even then, the calm was an illusion. Beneath the crust, the mantle churned with slow, powerful motion. Heat continued to rise from radioactive elements deep within. This internal activity ensured that Earth would never settle into complete stillness. Pressure built where hot material pushed upward. Elsewhere, cooler regions contracted and drew the surface inward. These forces created tension in the new crust, making it prone to cracking and shifting. This delicate balance between cooling at the surface and heating from below defined the planet's early character. It created a world where the outer shell could form, break, and reform, each cycle adding complexity to the landscape. What appears today as a stable foundation began as a thin, flexible layer responding to steady internal motion. Life would one day depend on this arrangement. A planet that cooled too quickly would lose its energy. A planet that never cooled would remain entirely molten. Earth existed between these extremes, holding just enough warmth to stay active while allowing a surface capable of supporting future oceans and ecosystems. From this early stage onward, Earth carried a persistent restlessness within it. The crust offered temporary structure, but the interior shaped its long-term evolution. Mountains would rise from this tension. Oceans would pool in depressions formed by shifting plates. Continents would drift as the mantle beneath them continued to move. Everything that followed was built on the foundation created by these first cycles of heat, motion, and change. As the planet continued to cool, it did not settle into stability. Instead, it entered a slower rhythm of transformation, one that would shape its entire future. Life would emerge within this rhythm, learning not to wait for stillness, but to adapt to a world defined by movement. As Earth's surface cooled further, the planet entered a stage where a true crust could form. Thin at first, irregular and fragile, but stable enough to survive more than a fleeting moment. This crust appeared as scattered plates of solid material floating upon a deeper layer that remained hot, soft, and constantly in motion. To the eye, if anyone had been there to witness it, the surface might have seemed firm. But this firmness was only a temporary balance between cooling above and persistent heat below. The crust was never meant to stand still. It shifted slightly as material moved beneath it, responding to forces that were slow yet immense in scale. The planet was learning to express its inner energy through quiet, continuous rearrangement. These early patches of crust thickened and fused where heat escaped more slowly. In other regions, where rising plumes of hot material pressed upward, the crust stretched, cracked, or thinned. This uneven distribution of heat created zones of tension. Over long periods, these tensions produced fractures that allowed molten material to well up, adding new surface or reshaping what already existed. The crust was not a shield separating the surface from the interior. It was an extension of the interior, shaped by the same forces that churned deep below. Every mountain, valley, and plateau that would one day exist had its origins in these first subtle motions. Over time, these floating plates began to interact with one another. Some moved apart, allowing material to rise and form new crust. Others pushed together, forcing their edges upward or downward depending on their density and motion. Even in its earliest phases, the crust behaved like a collection of rafts drifting on a slow, powerful current. The movement was so gradual that no moment offered clear evidence of motion, Yet across millions of years, the distances traveled would be immense. The planet's surface was becoming a dynamic system, capable of reorganizing itself through tension, compression, and the steady release of heat. The cooling crust created the first opportunities for water to accumulate. As temperatures fell, water vapor in the atmosphere condensed and formed early oceans. But even these bodies of water were shaped by the restless crust beneath them. Basins formed and deepened where plates pulled apart or sagged under their own weight. Elsewhere, rising material lifted the surface high above sea level. The distribution of oceans and land would never be fixed. It would respond continuously to subtle adjustments in the crust and mantle, long before life appeared to witness the change. From above, the early Earth might have seemed peaceful at times, wrapped in clouds and steam. But beneath that calm exterior, energy pulsed with steady determination. Heat radiated outward from the deep interior, and the crust responded with small but persistent shifts. These movements were not disruptions in an otherwise quiet world. They were the world's natural rhythm. The appearance of stability was simply the result of movement occurring on a scale far beyond human perception. As the crust continued to strengthen, it became more capable of holding shape, yet never rigid enough to resist the planet's interior forces. The surface grew more complex, forming ridges, depressions, and the first hints of long chains of elevated land. Each feature was temporary, shaped by a balance of motion and resistance. Over time, erosion and new cycles of crust formation would reshape these landscapes again and again. Nothing on the surface was permanent. Everything reflected the ongoing conversation between heat below and cooling above. When life eventually emerged, it did so on a planet where the ground itself was part of a continuous transformation. The crust was not a fixed foundation, but a flexible participant in Earth's evolution. Its movements created new environments, shifted coastlines, and provided a diversity of conditions that would challenge and support living systems. The early crust, with all its imperfections, laid the groundwork for a world capable of sustaining oceans, atmosphere, and the long history of life that would follow. In this way, the crust became a quiet storyteller, recording the slow processes that shaped the planet and offering hints of the forces beneath. Its movements would never cease. They would simply move into a gentler rhythm, steady, patient, and ongoing. Beneath the crust, the deeper rhythms of the planet continued their slow work. Heat from the interior rose steadily, carrying material upward in patterns that formed long, gradual currents. These currents were not violent in the way early collisions had been. Instead, they behaved like slow tides within solid rock, moving with such patience that their effects would only become visible over millions of years. Yet despite their slowness, they were powerful enough to shape the entire surface of the planet. Where warm material rose, the crust above it lifted and thinned. Where cooler material descended, the crust thickened and sagged. Earth's interior was guiding the surface gently but persistently, teaching the crust to move in response to invisible forces from below. As these internal currents grew more organized, they began to gather the floating plates of crust into larger sections. Some plates expanded while others fractured, creating boundaries where motion accumulated. Over immense spans of time, these boundaries became zones of transformation. When plates pushed toward each other, one might slide beneath the other, returning material to the mantle. When plates pulled apart, new crust formed as molten rock emerged from below and cooled at the surface. These cycles created a surface that behaved not as a still shell but as a living mosaic in constant rearrangement. The movement of the plates became the foundation for many of the features that define Earth today. Chains of mountains rose where plates collided and pressed upward. Deep trenches formed where one plate bent downward into the interior. Rifts appeared where plates separated and allowed fresh material to rise. Although these changes were slow, they occurred with such consistency that the surface never settled into a single configuration. Continents were born, drifted apart, collided, and were reshaped countless times. Oceans expanded and contracted, basins deepened and filled. The crust recorded each of these events in layers of rock that would one day tell a long story of motion. While the planet's interior continued its steady work, the atmosphere and oceans responded to the changing shape of the surface. Rain fell onto new landscapes, carving rivers that carried material toward the sea. Wind shaped dunes in dry regions and eroded cliffs along coastlines. Water filled the lowest areas, forming oceans that shifted their boundaries as the crust moved beneath them. Each of these processes added another layer of complexity to the developing world. The planet was organizing itself into systems that would interact endlessly: air, water, rock, and energy, forming cycles that balanced and rebalanced over time. The crust, though solid, remained sensitive to the forces beneath it. When pressure built slowly, earthquakes occurred, releasing energy in sudden movements that reshaped the ground. When heat accumulated in pockets below the surface, molten material pushed upward and created volcanoes that released gases and ash into the air. These events, dramatic when viewed on human timescales, were simply the surface expressing the deep emotions of the planet. They were moments in the long rhythm of heat traveling outward and the crust adjusting to its presence. Had there been observers at this stage, they might have seen Earth as unpredictable or volatile. But beneath the changing landscapes lay a remarkable consistency. The planet was not acting at random. It was responding to the fundamental physics that guided its formation: heat moving outward, material adjusting to pressure, and energy seeking equilibrium through motion. Over time, these processes would create a diverse range of environments. Some would be warm and shallow, others would be cold and deep, some would rise into mountain peaks, others would lie hidden beneath oceans. It was within these varied landscapes that life would one day take root, not because the planet had become calm, but because its restlessness created the conditions that allowed complexity to emerge. The moving crust opened pathways for water, nutrients, and energy to circulate. It created edges, boundaries, and transitions between environments, places where chemical reactions could occur in unique ways. The crust's slow, patient movement became a quiet architect, preparing a world capable of hosting organisms that would adapt to its ever-changing nature. With each cycle of rising, sinking, cracking, and rebuilding, Earth refined the surface that life would inherit. And although the crust appeared solid, it continued to carry the memory of motion within it, responding gently to the deep forces below. This balance between stability and change became one of the planet's defining features, a steady, enduring restlessness that set the stage for everything that followed. As the drifting plates settled into long cycles of motion, Earth's surface began to show clearer patterns, though none of them were permanent. The rising and sinking of crust shaped broad regions where heat gathered beneath the surface, creating volcanic arcs and long ridges. Along these ridges, molten material emerged and slowly added new layers of rock, pushing older layers aside. Far away from these active zones, the crust cooled more deeply, thickened, and carried continents like rafts on a slowly shifting sea of stone. The continents moved so gradually that no single generation could ever sense the motion. Yet across millions of years, their paths traced wide arcs through changing climates. These movements influenced everything above them. When continents drifted toward warmer latitudes, the atmosphere above them responded with higher temperatures and new patterns of rainfall. When they drifted toward the poles, ice accumulated and reflected sunlight back into space, cooling the planet in ways that affected distant environments. Even the shape of ocean basins shifted as plates rearranged themselves, altering currents that carried heat around the world. Earth's surface did not simply sit quietly under the sky. It acted as a regulator of the climate, guiding the flow of energy and water across the globe. Rivers formed along paths defined by subtle variations in the crust. Water followed gravity downward, carving canyons, shaping deltas, and delivering minerals to the sea. These rivers changed their courses repeatedly as the land beneath them rose or fell. Floodplains expanded and contracted, coastlines advanced and retreated with each shift in sea level. The crust, though slow to change, provided endless possibilities for new landscapes to form. Even the smallest adjustment in elevation could redirect an entire river system, affecting everything downstream in ways that would unfold gradually through time. As Earth continued to lose heat internally, the crust thickened further, yet never enough to stop moving entirely. Deep beneath the surface, material circulated like water in a pot heated from below, rising where it warmed, sinking where it cooled. These currents generated subtle stresses in the crust. Sometimes the crust bent gently, other times it fractured suddenly, releasing built-up energy in the form of earthquakes. These events were part of the planet's natural rhythm, reminders that the surface was a participant in deeper processes, not a barrier against them. Volcanoes provided another expression of the planet's inner workings. When molten rock rose to the surface, it carried gases that helped form the atmosphere. Each eruption altered the chemical balance of the air, sometimes warming the planet, sometimes cooling it. Ash settled across oceans and continents, enriching soils that would one day support forests and grasslands. Lava flows hardened into new surfaces, creating land where nothing had existed before. These contributions were not accidental. They were the outward signs of a planet continually remaking itself. Over millions of years, these volcanic and tectonic processes shaped the diversity of Earth's landscapes. Broad mountain ranges rose where plates collided. Expansive plains formed where old mountains had eroded into fine particles carried by wind and rivers. Deep valleys appeared where crust had stretched or faulted. Each terrain held different temperatures, pressures, and chemical compositions. Together, they created a mosaic of environments with varying potentials for future life. Yet for all its activity, the planet maintained a steady rhythm. Nothing on Earth happened in isolation. Movements in the crust influenced the atmosphere. Changes in the atmosphere affected the oceans. Shifts in the oceans sculpted coastlines. And all of these processes strengthened one another in cycles that unfolded slowly but consistently. The crust was never fully calm, but its restlessness was patient and ordered, following patterns shaped by heat, gravity, and time. In this world of slow transformation, the stage was set for something remarkable. As the crusts stabilized just enough to maintain oceans, and as volcanic gases helped build an atmosphere capable of supporting complex chemistry, Earth entered a new chapter. Its surface no longer resembled the molten world of its earliest days, yet it carried the same energy within it, gentler now, more rhythmic, and ready to support the beginnings of life. Oceans did not appear in an instant, and they did not settle into calm blue expanses as soon as they formed. They began as hot, mineral-rich waters collecting in the lowest depressions of a still-cooling crust. Steam condensed into sheets of rain that fell for countless years, feeding growing basins that shifted shape as the crust continued to move beneath them. In these early stages, the oceans were far from stable. Warm currents rose from volcanic ridges along the seafloor. Minerals dissolved into the water as hydrothermal vents released bursts of heat and chemical compounds. The oceans mixed constantly, stirring through temperature differences and the slow rearrangement of the crust. What looked like water pooled across the planet was actually a dynamic environment shaped by both surface cooling and deep interior energy. Beneath the waves, the seafloor held its own patterns of restlessness. Molten material rose at certain boundaries, creating long underwater ridges that pushed water upward and redirected currents. Elsewhere, cold, dense crust sank back into the mantle, pulling material downward and forming deep trenches. These shifting landscapes shaped the flow of water above them, creating zones where heat accumulated and others where cold descended. Even before life appeared, the oceans were alive with motion, not biological motion, but geological and thermal pulses that shaped every drop of water. The rhythm of the planet extended into the sea, giving the oceans a structure that was complex from their very beginning. As the oceans cooled further, they began interacting more intimately with the atmosphere. Winds brushed their surfaces and drove waves that traveled great distances. Evaporation carried water vapor back into the sky, where it condensed and fell again as rain. Each cycle transported heat and minerals, blending waters that had once been isolated. The earliest oceans were not uniform. They varied in temperature, composition, and light as they interacted with the planet's shifting crust and evolving atmosphere. Some regions were warm and shallow, bathed in sunlight. Others were dark and frigid, lying far below the reach of surface air. These variations created a range of environments that would one day support different forms of life. At certain depths and temperatures, chemical reactions occurred that would have been impossible on a dry, still planet. Minerals released from hydrothermal vents met colder seawater and precipitated into structures that rose from the sea floor like chimneys. These vents acted as natural laboratories, offering conditions in which energy, heat, and chemical gradients were all present together. Even in the absence of life, the oceans demonstrated an ability to create order from complexity, forming patterns and structures that hinted at possibilities to come. The movement of water ensured that no environment remained isolated for long. Materials were carried upward, downward, and across great distances, blending signals from the deep interior with those from the atmosphere above. Over time, the oceans stabilized enough to maintain their overall shape, yet they never became still. Tides pulled by the moon and the sun moved water rhythmically along coastlines. Storms stirred the surface. Temperature differences between equatorial and polar regions drove great conveyor belts of circulation that transported heat across the globe. These oceanic currents shaped climate and weather long before the first organisms drifted through the water. The oceans acted as a vast reservoir of energy, always absorbing, releasing, and redistributing heat. This movement did not calm the planet. It connected it, tying together regions separated by great distances. As continents continued their slow drift, their shapes and positions altered the paths of ocean currents. Narrow seaways opened and closed, large basins deepened or rose toward the surface. These changes affected how water flowed, creating cycles that lasted millions of years. Some periods saw warm water reaching the poles, melting ice, and raising sea levels. Other periods saw barriers form that redirected currents into new patterns, cooling regions that had once been warm. The oceans, guided by the moving crust beneath them, became major drivers of planetary climate, carrying heat around the world in ways that would eventually shape the environments where life took hold. Even now, the oceans are never still. Waves rise and fall. Currents travel like great rivers beneath the surface. Deep water forms in cold polar regions and sinks, beginning journeys that take centuries to complete. Each movement is part of a larger pattern that reflects the planet's interior heat, its rotation, its orbit, and the shifting shape of its crust. Long before the first cells emerged, the oceans had already become a restless, interconnected system, one capable of sustaining the complex chemistry that would lead to life, shaped by a planet that found balance not through stillness, but through continuous motion. Life emerged in a world without oxygen, a world that would feel harsh and unfamiliar compared to the conditions we know today. The early atmosphere was dense with volcanic gases, containing carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia, and traces of sulfur compounds. Ultraviolet radiation from the young sun reached the surface with little to filter it. Lightning flickered across the sky as storms built energy from the heated oceans and cooling land. To an observer, this environment might have seemed hostile, yet these very conditions created the gradients of energy and chemistry that made the first steps toward life possible. Life did not appear in a gentle cradle. It appeared in a world full of reactive substances and shifting environments. Deep in the oceans, especially around hydrothermal vents, mixtures of hot, mineral-rich water met colder seawater. Here, chemical reactions released energy that could be used by early molecular systems. These reactions created patterns and structures that persisted long enough to interact with one another. Compartments formed naturally as minerals precipitated out, creating small pockets where molecules could concentrate. Within these pockets, chemical chains formed, broke apart, and reformed. Some combinations remained stable longer than others. The world was not yet alive, but patterns began to emerge, patterns that hinted at replication, storage of energy, and gradual increase in complexity. As time passed, some of these molecular structures gained the ability to maintain themselves. They used the chemical energy available in their surroundings, captured from gradients in heat and minerals. These early systems did not rely on oxygen. They relied on reactions between hydrogen, carbon compounds, and elements released from the vents. The environment changed constantly, but these molecular structures adapted to shifts in temperature, acidity, and chemical availability. They found stability not in stillness but in responsiveness. This trait would become essential for all life that followed. Gradually, These self-maintaining systems began to store information in repeating molecular sequences. This allowed them to preserve successful structures across generations, even when the environment changed. They divided when they became too large, and their fragments continued the same cycles. Though simple, they represented the start of life as a process, one driven by energy gradients, maintained by chemistry, and shaped by the restless nature of the planet. Life did not wait for perfect conditions. It grew within imperfection, shaped by variability rather than hindered by it. The world above these early oceans had little resemblance to the one we see today. Without oxygen, the sky had different colors, influenced by volcanic gases and particulate matter. Lightning was frequent as storms interacted with a warm, energetic atmosphere. Rain carried dissolved minerals from newly formed land into the seas, enriching them further. Conditions changed quickly on geological timescales. Temperatures fluctuated with volcanic activity. Oceans mixed differently as continents shifted, yet early life continued to survive by adapting to each new challenge. Some early organisms began to specialize in extracting energy from sunlight. They used pigments that allowed them to capture tiny amounts of light, even through layers of water. Their processes did not produce oxygen at first. Instead, they used sulfur or other compounds to build their structures. Over time, new forms emerged that did release oxygen as a byproduct. At first, this oxygen reacted with minerals in the oceans and remained invisible, but eventually the supply exceeded the planet's ability to absorb it, and oxygen began accumulating in the atmosphere. This change was slow yet profound. It would reshape the chemistry of the air and oceans, creating challenges for existing life while opening possibilities for future organisms. In this oxygen-free world, survival depended on flexibility. Organisms had to endure periods of heat, cold, radiation, and chemical shifts. They found refuge in sediments, in rocks, and near vents, where conditions were more stable. Diversity increased as life explored different chemical pathways. Some organisms thrived in boiling water, others survived in icy regions near the poles. Life spread not because the world was welcoming, but because life could adjust to the world's restlessness. This adaptability became one of Earth's defining biological traits. The emergence of life did not calm the planet. Instead, it added a new layer of interaction. Living systems began altering their environments, taking in certain chemicals and releasing others. The oceans became laboratories filled with evolving possibilities. No equilibrium was permanent. Everything changed gradually, shaped by the planet's movements and the expanding capacities of life itself. In this world without oxygen, life took its first steps, and in doing so, it entered into a long dialogue with a planet that had never been still. As oxygen slowly began to accumulate in the atmosphere, the planet entered one of the most transformative periods in its history. Life, which had arisen in an environment rich in carbon dioxide, methane, and volcanic gases, now found itself influencing the very composition of the air. The organisms responsible for this shift were simple in structure yet profound in impact. Through their ability to use sunlight as an energy source, they released oxygen as a byproduct, at first in amounts too small to alter the world, and then in quantities that slowly exceeded the capacity of oceans and rocks to absorb it. This change did not happen quickly. It unfolded over hundreds of millions of years, but its effects reached every corner of the planet. At first, oxygen reacted with dissolved iron in the oceans. Vast quantities of iron combined with the rising oxygen and fell to the seafloor, forming layers that would one day become iron-rich rock. These reactions kept oxygen levels low for a long time, preventing it from accumulating in the atmosphere. But eventually, the available iron became saturated. Oxygen began to spread into the air, altering chemical balances that had been stable for ages. The atmosphere developed a new character, one that would eventually allow for a wider range of life forms. But change of this magnitude often brings disruption as well as opportunity. For many early organisms, oxygen was toxic. They had evolved pathways suited to an oxygen-free world, relying on chemical reactions that oxygen could disrupt or destroy. As oxygen spread, these organisms were forced to retreat into environments where the gas could not reach. They moved into deep sediments, underground pockets, and regions of the ocean where sunlight never penetrated. Some vanished entirely, unable to adjust to the new conditions. Others adapted by developing ways to protect themselves from oxygen or by using it in controlled amounts. This period marked one of the earliest mass extinctions on Earth, an event not caused by external impact or sudden climate shift, but by life itself. Yet even as some organisms struggled, others flourished. Oxygen opened new possibilities for extracting energy. Chemical reactions involving oxygen released far more energy than those that existed before. This abundance of energy allowed life to grow more complex. Cells developed new internal structures to manage the increased energy flow. Some began to form cooperative groups, eventually evolving into multicellular organisms. The rise of oxygen did not immediately transform the planet into a world of abundant life, but it laid a foundation for complexity that would unfold slowly and steadily. Meanwhile, the atmosphere itself changed in texture and behavior. With more oxygen, new molecules formed that helped shield the surface from harmful ultraviolet radiation. This protective layer allowed organisms to survive closer to the surface of the oceans and eventually on land. Climate patterns evolved as gases capable of absorbing heat fluctuated in concentration. Winds circulated differently across the planet, interacting with mountains and basins shaped by the drifting crust. The environment became a more dynamic system, in which biological activity and physical processes influenced one another in increasingly intricate ways. Oceans also responded to rising oxygen levels. Chemical balances shifted, making some regions more hospitable to new forms of life, while rendering others more challenging. Nutrients cycled through the water differently, carried by currents shaped by the planet's rotation and the movement of continents. Sediments captured the remains of organisms that did not survive the transition, preserving traces of the world before oxygen. These sediments formed layered archives that recorded the story of early life and the dramatic changes it endured. Oxygen, at first a subtle presence, became one of the most powerful forces guiding evolution. It altered the energy available to organisms, influenced the structure of ecosystems, and shaped the flow of nutrients through oceans and land. The atmosphere was no longer a passive mixture of gases. It became an active participant in life's development, reflecting and reinforcing the planet's ongoing transformation. The rise of oxygen was not a single event but a gradual, uneven transition. It unfolded like a slow tide, altering coastlines, flooding some regions with new possibilities, and leaving others behind. Through this process, Earth became more than a world shaped by geology alone. It became a planet where life and environment interacted in a continuous cycle, each influencing the other over vast expanses of time. As oxygen continued to reshape the atmosphere and oceans, Earth entered a new era defined by shifting climates. These changes did not arrive suddenly, nor did they follow a single pattern. Instead, they unfolded through long cycles influenced by the movement of continents, variations in the planet's orbit, changes in solar energy, and the evolving composition of the air itself. Climate on Earth has never been fixed. It has always oscillated between warmer and colder periods, sometimes gradually, sometimes sharply, each transition altering the environments where life could thrive. These fluctuations were not disruptions in an otherwise steady world. They were part of the planet's natural rhythm. Over millions of years, ice advanced and retreated across continents, carving valleys and smoothing landscapes that would later host forests and grasslands. During colder periods, sea levels dropped as water froze into massive ice sheets, exposing land that had once lain beneath shallow seas. When temperatures rose again, the ice melted, sea levels climbed, and coastlines shifted inland. Entire ecosystems moved with these changes. Forests expanded into regions that had once been tundra, while warm, shallow seas spread into low-lying areas. Life adapted by migrating, evolving, or disappearing as conditions transformed around it. The positions of continents played a crucial role in shaping these climate cycles. When landmasses clustered near the poles, ice could accumulate more easily, leading to long cold periods. When continents spread across the equator, they absorbed more sunlight, warming the planet and reducing the extent of ice. Ocean currents responded to these arrangements, carrying heat around the world in patterns that influenced rainfall, temperature, and storm behavior. A slight change in the shape of a coastline or the opening of a narrow seaway could redirect currents and alter climates across entire hemispheres. These adjustments occurred so slowly that no single moment marked their beginning or end, yet their effects built steadily over time. Atmospheric composition added another layer to this dynamic system. Gases that could trap heat, such as carbon dioxide and methane, fluctuated in concentration due to volcanic eruptions, the weathering of rocks, and the evolving activity of organisms. When these gases increased, the planet warmed. When they decreased, temperatures fell, sometimes dramatically. These changes influenced cloud formation, precipitation patterns, and the distribution of ecosystems. The climate system responded to countless interactions between air, land, and sea, creating outcomes that varied across different regions of the planet. Life itself played a role in shaping climate. Organisms that produced oxygen altered not only the chemistry of the atmosphere, but also the way sunlight was absorbed or reflected. Expanding forests captured carbon dioxide and released moisture that influenced rainfall. Marine organisms drew minerals from seawater to build shells, affecting nutrient cycles and the balance of gases in the ocean. Each biological development introduced new variables into a climate system already influenced by the planet's internal and external forces. Climate was not simply a background condition. It was a dynamic result of interactions linking geology, biology, and the flow of energy from the sun. These shifts meant that no environment remained unchanged for long. Deserts expanded and contracted, grasslands advanced into former forests, lakes dried or refilled. Even stable-seeming environments, such as coral reefs or temperate forests, moved across the landscape over long timescales as temperature and rainfall patterns evolved. Species adapted by developing traits suited to new conditions, or they migrated to regions where the climate remained favorable. The pressure to adjust shaped the evolution of life, encouraging diversity and resilience. Earth's climate system did not seek balance in the sense of returning to a single preferred state. Instead, it moved through cycles influenced by both predictable factors, such as orbital variations, and unpredictable ones, such as large volcanic events or asteroid impacts. The planet's restlessness extended into its atmosphere, guiding its rhythms with a slow but persistent hand. Each climate shift created new challenges and opportunities for life, weaving together geological motion and biological adaptation into a continuous story of change. Through all these transitions, Earth remained a world defined not by stability but by transformation. Climate, like the crust and the oceans, became another expression of a planet in motion, setting the stage for the next chapters in the long history of life. Mass extinctions emerged as some of the most dramatic turning points in Earth's long story, yet they were not interruptions in an otherwise steady progression. They were consequences of the planet's inherent restlessness, points at which environmental stresses built up to levels that existing life could no longer withstand. These events unfolded over varying timescales. Some were sudden, triggered by rapid shifts in climate or massive geological activity. Others took shape slowly as ecosystems strained under conditions that changed faster than species could adapt. Regardless of their pace, each extinction swept away organisms that had once flourished, opening new ecological spaces for forms of life yet to come. One of the greatest drivers of extinction was volcanic activity on a massive scale. When large regions of the crust fractured and allowed molten rock to reach the surface repeatedly over long periods, they released vast quantities of gases into the atmosphere. These gases altered climates by warming or cooling the planet, depending on their composition and concentration. Ash spread across continents and oceans, blocking sunlight and disrupting photosynthesis. Oceans absorbed excess carbon dioxide, becoming more acidic and less capable of supporting marine life. These changes did not occur in isolation. They formed feedback loops that amplified one another, eventually transforming environments so completely that many species could not survive. Asteroid impacts were another powerful force capable of reshaping life on Earth. When a large object struck the planet, it released energy equivalent to billions of tons of explosives. The impact site vaporized everything within it, sending debris high into the atmosphere. Dust and aerosols blocked sunlight, cooling the surface rapidly. Fires ignited across continents, releasing smoke that further dimmed the skies. Ocean currents shifted as temperatures fell. For species already pressured by climatic or ecological change, these rapid and widespread disruptions proved overwhelming. Yet even in the wake of such destruction, life found ways to continue, adapting to the altered world that followed. Climate change itself, driven by continental drift, orbital variations, and atmospheric fluctuations, also played a key role in many extinction events. When temperatures rose or fell beyond certain thresholds, ecosystems struggled to adjust. Plants and animals that had evolved under specific conditions faced new challenges as rainfall patterns shifted, seasons changed, and familiar habitats disappeared. Deserts expanded into areas that had once been fertile. Ice advanced across landscapes that had supported forests and grasslands. Ocean circulation patterns reorganized, disrupting food chains that depended on stable currents. These transitions were not inherently destructive, but the pace and magnitude of some changes pushed many species beyond their limits. Despite the loss these events brought, each extinction was followed by a remarkable period of renewal. With old species gone, ecological niches opened for new life forms to evolve. Organisms that survived these challenging intervals often did so because they possessed traits that allowed them to endure uncertain conditions. Flexibility in diet, broad temperature tolerance, or rapid reproduction. These survivors became the ancestors of future lineages, shaping the trajectory of life in ways that might not have been possible without the pressure of extinction. Forests emerged where shallow seas had once existed. Reefs re-established themselves in new regions. Entire groups of organisms evolved to fill roles left vacant by those that had vanished. Extinctions did not erase life's progress. They redirected it. In each recovery phase, evolution accelerated, producing new branches on the tree of life. Over long spans, these periods of diversification reshaped the planet's biological landscape as dramatically as the extinctions that had preceded them. The planet itself contributed to this process, guiding the conditions under which life could grow and adapt. The crust moved, the oceans circulated, and the atmosphere shifted. Through these transformations, Earth supported a continuous cycle of collapse and renewal that enriched its biological history. Seen across geological time, mass extinctions were not anomalies. They were part of the planet's enduring pattern of motion and change. Each event carried both loss and possibility. And within this rhythm of destruction and rebirth, life found ways to evolve, diversify, and prepare for the next chapter in Earth's unfolding story. Life's recovery after each extinction did more than refill the planet with new species. It revealed a deep pattern in the relationship between Earth and the organisms that lived upon it. When ecosystems collapsed, they did not rebuild themselves into exact replicas of what had come before. Instead, they reorganized around the conditions that now existed, conditions shaped by altered climates, new coastlines, changed ocean chemistry, and landscapes renewed by volcanic activity or erosion. Each recovery acted as a reset point, clearing old structures and allowing different possibilities to emerge. This dynamic formed a long, slow conversation between the planet's physical processes and the biological creativity of life. In the aftermath of extinction, surviving species often found themselves in environments with fewer competitors and more open space. Resources that had once been contested became accessible. New food sources emerged as plants and microbes adapted to altered conditions. Predators and prey entered unfamiliar relationships. These shifts encouraged experimentation. Species diversified into forms that might have remained unlikely or suppressed under earlier conditions. Some organisms became larger, others smaller. Some developed new strategies for movement, feeding, or reproduction. Over time, entire ecosystems assembled themselves from these new combinations, forming communities that bore little resemblance to those that had existed before. Geological changes played an essential role in these recoveries. As continents drifted, They created new coastlines and separated habitats that had once been connected. Isolation encouraged species to evolve independently, producing unique adaptations suited to local conditions. Mountain ranges rose slowly, reshaping rainfall patterns and creating varied environments along their slopes. Rivers carved new paths across continents, linking ecosystems in unexpected ways. Everywhere the crust moved, new opportunities emerged for life to explore. The planet did not simply provide a stage for recovery, it guided the process by altering the shape of the world itself. Ocean systems also influenced these transitions. After extinction events, ocean currents often reorganized due to changes in salinity, temperature, or basin shape. These shifts determined where nutrients accumulated and how heat moved around the globe. Regions that had once been barren became fertile as currents carried upwelling waters rich in minerals. Other regions grew quieter, supporting fewer organisms until new communities adapted to the changed conditions. Marine life responded quickly to these patterns, diversifying into forms that thrived in deep trenches, shallow coastal waters, and open seas shaped by the planet's gradual rearrangement of continents and climates. Atmospheric changes added another layer of complexity. Extinction events often altered the concentration of gases in the air, influencing temperature and rainfall. Afterward, the atmosphere interacted with forests, grasslands, and oceans in ways that shaped the planet's recovery. Plants evolved new strategies for capturing energy from sunlight, drawing carbon dioxide from the air, and releasing oxygen. These changes affected climate, which in turn influenced the evolution of animals and microbes. The atmosphere became not only a medium for weather, but a responsive system linked to the rise and fall of life. Throughout these cycles, one pattern remained steady. Recovery took time, often tens of millions of years. Yet the pace of recovery did not reflect weakness. It reflected the careful building of complexity, layer by layer, as life adapted to the transformed world. Diversity eventually returned, often exceeding what had existed before. Some of the most iconic groups of organisms in Earth's history arose in the aftermath of extinction events, taking advantage of new ecological openings. The renewal was not uniform across the planet, but it was persistent, gradually restoring balance through countless small adjustments. The repeated emergence of life after extinction demonstrated the resilience built into Earth's systems. The planet did not seek to recreate the past. It moved forward, guided by the interplay of geology, climate, and biology. This cycle of collapse and renewal revealed a profound truth. On a world defined by motion, survival depended not on permanence but on the ability to adapt to change. Each recovery expanded the possibilities for life, deepening the planet's biological richness while preserving the underlying rhythms that shaped its long history. As continents continued their long, slow journeys across the planet's surface, they carried ecosystems with them through shifting climates and changing environments. Land masses that once lay in tropical zones drifted toward cooler regions. Others moved from temperate climates into arid or icy conditions. These migrations were not noticeable within any single lifetime, but across millions of years they transformed entire landscapes. Forests that once thrived under warm, humid conditions found themselves gradually replaced by grasslands as rainfall patterns shifted. Species that depended on stable temperatures faced new challenges as seasons became more pronounced. Earth's restlessness guided these transformations, shaping the living world without pause. Isolation became one of the most powerful forces driving diversity. As continents separated, populations that once shared a common environment found themselves divided by oceans or mountain ranges. Over time, they adapted to the specific pressures of their new surroundings. Some evolved thicker fur to withstand colder climates. Others developed specialized diets to take advantage of plants that grew only in certain regions. In tropical areas, where warmth and moisture created dense vegetation, organisms adapted to complex forest structures. In drier regions, life evolved strategies to conserve water and survive long intervals without rain. The movement of continents created a natural laboratory for evolution, offering countless variations in climate, soil, and geography. New coastlines formed as land masses shifted, reshaping the boundaries between land and sea. These coastlines were dynamic places where tidal forces, waves, and river systems met. Estuaries expanded or contracted depending on sea level, creating rich environments where species from land and ocean interacted. Mangrove forests, salt marshes, and intertidal zones developed along these shifting edges, each hosting communities adapted to changing water levels and fluctuating salinity. As continents drifted, these environments appeared, faded, and reappeared in new forms, mirroring the planet's ongoing transformation. Mountain building became another significant consequence of continental movement. When land masses collided, their edges crumpled and rose, forming ranges that stretched across entire regions. These mountains influenced wind patterns, directing moist air upward and causing it to cool and release rainfall. On the opposite side, descending air created dry conditions that shaped deserts and grasslands. Rivers carved deep valleys through these rising formations, carrying minerals and nutrients across the landscape. Life adapted to the wide range of conditions created by mountains, from cool alpine slopes to warm foothills and fertile valleys. Each elevation provided unique opportunities, encouraging organisms to develop traits suited to the changing environment. As continents approached new latitudes, they also affected the distribution of sunlight across the surface. Polar regions experienced dramatic shifts between long periods of daylight and extended darkness, influencing plant growth and animal behavior. Equatorial regions, exposed to more consistent sunlight, supported dense forests and diverse ecosystems. These variations interacted with atmospheric circulation patterns, shaping climate zones that drifted as the continents moved. Species responded by shifting their ranges, adapting to new conditions, or retreating into stable refuges where climate fluctuations were less extreme. The slow passage of continents across the globe also influenced ocean currents. As land masses altered the shape of ocean basins, they redirected the flow of warm and cold water. These currents acted as conveyors of heat, moderating temperatures in coastal regions and affecting global climate. Marine life evolved in response to these patterns, filling niches created by the changing availability of nutrients and the shifting distribution of temperature zones. Coral reefs flourished in warm, shallow waters, while cold, nutrient-rich regions supported vast populations of plankton and the larger organisms that fed upon them. Through these long cycles of movement and rearrangement, evolution thrived. Species diversified in isolation, adapted to new environments, and reconnected when continents collided again. The story of life became intertwined with the motion of the crust, reflecting the planet's deep rhythms. Earth's surface was never static. It changed gradually but persistently, creating a world where adaptation was not simply an advantage but a necessity. In this dynamic landscape, life found endless opportunities to grow, diversify, and transform, guided by the quiet yet powerful forces that shaped the planet itself. Environmental pressure became one of the most influential forces guiding the evolution of life on this moving planet. As climates shifted, continents drifted, and ecosystems reorganized, organisms were constantly challenged to adjust. Some environments grew warmer, others cooler. Rainfall patterns changed, altering where plants could grow and where animals could find water. Food sources appeared in new places and vanished from old ones. In this ever-changing world, pressure did not act as a destructive force alone. It acted as a catalyst, encouraging life to experiment with new forms, new behaviors, and new strategies for survival. In regions where resources were limited, competition intensified. Species that once thrived without challenge found themselves sharing space with newcomers better suited to the emerging conditions. Predators evolved sharper senses or more efficient hunting techniques. Prey developed better camouflage, greater agility, or the ability to sense danger more quickly. These adaptations emerged gradually, refined by countless generations. Each small improvement increased the likelihood of survival, allowing organisms to pass on traits that helped them fit the shifting landscape. Over time, these small changes accumulated, creating entirely new forms of life from ancestors that had looked and behaved very differently. Geography played a significant role in shaping these pressures. Environments separated by mountains or large bodies of water developed unique ecological challenges. In isolated valleys, species encountered fewer competitors and could evolve highly specialized traits suited to local conditions. On wide plains, where distances were great and resources varied, adaptability and mobility became crucial. Coastal regions demanded resilience to tides and storms. Deserts required efficient ways to conserve water and withstand extreme heat. Each environment imposed pressures that rewarded different solutions, resulting in a wide array of evolutionary paths. Climate variability created additional layers of complexity. Some regions experienced cycles of wet and dry seasons, forcing plants to develop strategies to store water or grow quickly when moisture returned. Animals in these regions evolved behaviors that allowed them to migrate, seek shelter, or adjust their diets depending on the season. Elsewhere, cold climates favored species with thick insulating layers, the ability to slow their metabolism, or behaviors such as huddling for warmth. Even aquatic environments faced their own pressures as ocean temperatures and currents changed, influencing how nutrients were distributed and where marine organisms could find suitable habitats. Social behavior also evolved in response to environmental pressure. In many species, cooperation increased survival in environments where food was scarce or predators were numerous. Groups could defend themselves more effectively, share knowledge of resource locations, or care for young collectively. These behaviors strengthened social structures and enabled more complex forms of communication. In other species, solitary strategies proved more effective, especially where competition was intense or resources were spread thinly across large areas. The diversity of social systems reflected the multitude of pressures acting on life, each shaping behaviors that improved survival in specific contexts. As pressures accumulated and environments continued to change, adaptability became one of the most valuable traits. Species capable of adjusting their diet, migrating to new regions, or altering their behaviors in response to shifting conditions had greater chances of enduring. Some developed generalized traits that worked across a wide range of environments, while others became highly specialized, thriving in very narrow conditions but vulnerable to sudden change. This diversity created a living mosaic, with organisms fitting into countless ecological roles shaped by the pressures of their surroundings. Environmental pressure did not act as a single force but as a combination of many influences: temperature, availability of water, presence of predators, competition for resources, and the movement of continents that shifted the very ground beneath the living world. These pressures guided evolution not through intention but through the steady filtering of traits that succeeded repeatedly over time. Life responded with creativity shaped by necessity, finding ways to persist in environments that were never fully predictable or stable. Through this ongoing process, the planet's restlessness became a source of innovation. Each pressure created an opportunity for life to expand into new forms and functions. The result was a world filled with organisms uniquely suited to the conditions around them, each a reflection of the challenges their ancestors had faced. In this dynamic relationship between environment and adaptation, Earth's deep rhythms and life's persistence became intertwined, forming a long narrative of change, resilience, and transformation. Life's move from the oceans onto land was one of the most profound transitions in Earth's history, yet it did not happen in a single moment or through a single species. It unfolded gradually, guided by geological shifts, changing climates, and the constant motion of the planet's surface. For millions of years, life existed almost entirely in the oceans, where water supported movement, protected organisms from ultraviolet radiation, and provided the chemical stability needed for growth. But as environments changed and new pressures emerged, certain organisms began exploring the boundary between sea and land, finding opportunities in places that once seemed inhospitable. Shallow coastal waters often served as the first stepping stones in this transition. These regions were shaped by tides, storms, and shifting shorelines created by the slow rise and fall of sea levels. Pools formed when water retreated, trapping organisms inside. Some of these pools evaporated partially, concentrating nutrients and creating environments rich in food but limited in oxygen. Organisms that could endure these fluctuating conditions gained advantages. Over time, certain species developed stronger limbs or structures that allowed them to push through mud and shallow water in search of new pools. These adaptations did not represent a conscious move toward land, but rather a response to pressures that rewarded flexibility and resilience in unstable environments. Plants took some of the earliest steps onto land, long before animals followed. Simple, algae-like organisms colonized damp shorelines, gradually developing adaptations that helped them withstand drying. They began forming structures that anchored them to soil and allowed them to absorb water from the ground. As these early plants spread, they altered the land itself. They stabilized sediments, retained moisture, and contributed to the formation of the planet's first true soils. Over time, plants evolved vascular systems that allowed them to transport water and nutrients over greater distances, enabling them to grow taller and capture more sunlight. These changes transformed barren coastlines into lush green landscapes that provided food and shelter for future land-dwelling animals. For animals, the shift to land required a different set of adaptations. Gills, efficient for extracting oxygen from water, were less effective in air. Limbs that pushed against water had to learn to support weight on solid ground. Sensory systems had to adjust to new forms of light, sound, and movement. The earliest vertebrates to venture onto land likely did so in short excursions, using muscular fins to drag themselves from one pool to another. Over countless generations, these fins strengthened, joints developed, and limbs capable of bearing weight emerged. These changes were gradual, shaped by pressures that rewarded the ability to survive in environments where water was not always reliable. As plants spread inland, they created new ecosystems that invited further exploration by animals. Insects evolved to feed on plants and to pollinate them, forming some of the earliest land-based food webs. Amphibians, with their dual reliance on water for reproduction and land for feeding, became among the first animals to live extensively outside the ocean, but even they remained tied to moist environments. It would take further evolutionary steps: stronger eggs that resisted drying, more efficient lungs, and skin that prevented water loss, before animals could roam freely across the expanding landscapes. Geological processes supported this transition by continually reshaping the land. Mountains rose, creating diverse habitats along their slopes. Rivers carved valleys that became corridors for plant and animal movement. Continents drifted into new climates, exposing organisms to selective pressures that encouraged further adaptation. Each change in the physical environment created opportunities for species to evolve traits that suited land-based life. Some became predators that prowled forests and plains. Others became grazers that fed on abundant vegetation. Over time, ecosystems grew more complex as species filled every niche that the planet's moving surface created. The shift from ocean to land did not mark the end of life's connection to water. Every organism that lives on land still carries traces of its aquatic ancestry: cells filled with water, chemical processes that depend on dissolved minerals, and developmental stages that echo ancient forms. Yet this transition represented a major expansion of life's possibilities. Land offered new sources of energy, new spaces to occupy, and new challenges that encouraged innovation. It allowed life to spread across continents, diversify into vast arrays of forms, and develop interactions that deepened the complexity of ecosystems. Life's move onto land was not a break from the rhythm of Earth's restlessness. It was a continuation of it. As the planet shifted, life shifted with it, using new environments to grow, adapt, and transform. The living world became more deeply entwined with the geological processes that shaped the surface, forming a partnership that would continue to evolve through every chapter that followed. Earth's atmosphere evolved alongside the planet's shifting surface and living systems, forming a dynamic layer that both protected life and shaped its possibilities. As oxygen continued to accumulate, the atmosphere developed new chemical balances that influenced temperature, rainfall, and the movement of winds across continents and oceans. Yet even as these changes unfolded, the atmosphere never settled into a fixed state. It remained sensitive to volcanic eruptions, variations in sunlight, the drifting of continents, and the activity of life itself. This responsiveness allowed the atmosphere to support increasingly complex ecosystems, but it also ensured that every environment would continue changing over time. The rise in oxygen triggered the formation of an ozone layer high above the surface. This layer absorbed much of the sun's harmful ultraviolet radiation, reducing the danger to emerging land-based organisms. With this protection, plants and animals could explore new environments without constant risk of damage from intense sunlight. The atmosphere thus acted as both shield and regulator, governing the amount of energy reaching the surface and influencing the development of climates across the globe. It worked in partnership with oceans and land, distributing heat and moisture in patterns that supported the spread of life. As plants expanded across continents, they played a more active role in shaping atmospheric conditions. They absorbed carbon dioxide through photosynthesis and released oxygen, altering the balance of gases in the air. Forests released water vapor that formed clouds, influencing both local and regional weather. These interactions helped stabilize temperatures in some regions and increased rainfall in others. The atmosphere responded to these changes by forming circulation patterns that moved warm air toward cooler areas and redistributed moisture across vast distances. Over time, this interplay between plants and the air created climates suitable for a wider range of organisms. The atmosphere's movement became one of the most important factors shaping life on land. Winds carried seeds across continents, allowing plants to colonize new regions. They spread spores and pollen, encouraging genetic exchange and diversification. Traveling storms brought rain to dry areas and shifted sediments that would later become fertile soil. Seasonal changes in atmospheric circulation created predictable patterns of wet and dry periods, guiding animal migrations and shaping the timing of plant growth. These rhythms became deeply woven into the lives of organisms that depended on them for survival. Temperature gradients across the atmosphere influenced how ecosystems developed. Near the equator, warm air rose and created rising columns that pushed moisture upward, forming clouds and heavy rainfall. These regions supported dense forests filled with diverse life. Closer to the poles, colder, drier air descended, forming landscapes with greater seasonal extremes. Between these zones, transitional climates supported grasslands, woodlands, and deserts. Each region reflected a balance between the atmosphere's global circulation and the shape of the continents beneath it. Life evolved to fit these patterns, forming communities adapted to specific ranges of temperature, light, and rainfall. The atmosphere also shaped Earth's long-term climate cycles. Slight variations in the planet's orbit affected how sunlight was distributed across the surface. These changes influenced the intensity of seasons, contributing to long cycles of glaciation and warming. Carbon dioxide levels rose and fell as volcanic activity waxed and waned, adding another layer of complexity to the climate system. The atmosphere recorded these shifts through changes in chemical composition, guiding how heat was retained or released into space. Each fluctuation had consequences for ecosystems, encouraging new adaptations or driving species to seek more favorable environments. Oceans and atmosphere worked together in an intricate dance. Warm ocean currents heated the air above them, while cold currents cooled it. Winds guided surface waters, shaping currents that influenced weather far from their origin. This interconnected system made Earth's climate unexpectedly stable on geological timescales, even as local environments changed. The atmosphere acted as a medium for distributing energy, helping prevent extreme temperature swings that could have threatened the survival of many species. As life grew more complex, the atmosphere continued responding to changes in plant cover, ocean chemistry, and volcanic activity. It never reached a final equilibrium. Instead, it formed a living, responsive layer that mirrored the planet's constant motion. Each shift in its composition or behavior opened new pathways for life to explore while closing others. In this way, the atmosphere became both a product of Earth's restlessness and a driver of the ongoing evolution that shaped the living world. Complex life grew larger and more intricate as Earth's environments continued to shift. With the atmosphere now carrying higher levels of oxygen, organisms could extract more energy from the food they consumed. This increase in available energy allowed bodies to grow in size and structure, supporting muscles capable of movement on land, circulatory systems that transported nutrients efficiently, and nervous systems that coordinated actions with greater precision. The rise of large organisms did not occur uniformly across the planet. It followed the contours of changing climates, the formation of new habitats, and the availability of resources shaped by Earth's ongoing geological motion. Forests expanded across warm, humid regions, creating layered environments filled with sunlight, shade, moisture, and rich soils. Plants developed taller trunks and broader canopies, capturing more sunlight and creating complex habitats for animals. Insects evolved to pollinate flowers and feed on leaves, becoming essential links in the growing web of life. Amphibians ventured further inland, and early reptiles emerged with adaptations that freed them from reliance on water for reproduction. These innovations allowed animals to explore drier environments, expanding the boundaries of life into areas once inhospitable. Each new adaptation opened pathways for further diversification, as organisms evolved to survive in environments shaped by the planet's shifting crust and atmosphere. As continents drifted, new climates emerged that challenged large organisms to adapt. In regions where rainfall decreased, open grasslands replaced forests. These open spaces favored animals capable of traveling long distances in search of food and water. Stronger limbs, efficient lungs, and faster movement became advantageous. Herbivores adapted by developing specialized teeth for grazing tough grasses, while predators evolved sharper senses and agile bodies for pursuing prey across wide expanses. The interplay between predators and prey shaped the evolution of both groups, encouraging speed, coordination, and strategies for survival in landscapes defined by motion and change. Oceans, too, became home to increasingly complex and larger organisms. Marine life responded to shifting currents, nutrient availability, and the chemistry of the water. Coral reefs flourished in warm, shallow seas, creating habitats that supported countless species. Fish evolved fins that allowed for precise movement, enabling them to navigate intricate reef structures. Larger marine animals, including early forms of sharks and marine reptiles, filled the oceans with diverse forms of predation and grazing. These ecosystems grew in complexity as ocean temperatures shifted, sea levels rose and fell, and continents continued to reshape the basins that held the seas. Seasonal cycles emerged as a powerful force guiding the behavior of large organisms. Changes in day length, temperature, and rainfall encouraged migrations across continents. Animals traveled vast distances to reach breeding grounds, follow food sources, or escape harsh climates. These migrations required cooperation, memory, and communication among individuals. Herds moved across plains in coordinated patterns, while flocks of birds followed invisible routes guided by wind patterns and the position of the sun. Each journey reflected a deep connection between life and the dynamic systems of Earth, where movement was not merely a response to the environment but a way of thriving within it. The evolution of sensory systems allowed large organisms to interact with their surroundings in increasingly sophisticated ways. Eyes adapted to different levels of light, enabling animals to see in dim forests, open plains, or underwater depths. Ears developed sensitivity to vibrations and sound frequencies, allowing communication across distances or through dense vegetation. Smell and taste evolved to help animals locate food, recognize danger, or identify mates. These sensory advancements supported behaviors that improved survival in ever-changing environments, making organisms more responsive to the subtle rhythms of the planet. Complex social structures emerged as well. Some species began living in groups where cooperation increased the chances of survival. Pack hunters worked together to bring down large prey. Primates formed communities that protected young, shared knowledge, and established social bonds. These behaviors required communication, memory, and emotional responses shaped by the pressures of living in variable environments. Social groups adapted collectively to changes in climate, food availability, and habitat structure. Through cooperation, many species found stability within Earth's shifting landscapes. Large organisms also influenced the planet in return. Grazers shaped the spread of grasslands by feeding on young trees and encouraging the growth of grasses. Predators controlled populations of herbivores, maintaining ecological balance. Forests expanded or contracted depending on the presence of animals that dispersed seeds or controlled pests. Life and environment became increasingly intertwined, each shaping the other through countless small interactions. In this era of complex and expansive ecosystems, Earth's restlessness continued to guide the evolution of large life forms. Continents drifted, climates shifted, oceans circulated, and organisms adapted. The planet provided a constantly changing backdrop, and life responded with innovation, resilience, and diversity. Through this interplay, Earth became a world rich with forms and behaviors that reflected both the challenges and the opportunities created by its enduring motion. Even as Earth supported flourishing ecosystems, it never ceased to move through cycles of disruption and renewal. Geological activity, atmospheric shifts, and changes in ocean circulation continued to place pressure on living systems, sometimes gradually and sometimes abruptly. Over long stretches of time, these pressures accumulated until ecosystems reached points where small changes produced sweeping consequences. Extinctions occurred, not always on the scale of the earlier catastrophic events, but often significant enough to reorder life across continents and oceans. Each collapse was followed by renewal, deepening the connection between the planet's physical processes and the evolution of its inhabitants. After major disruptions, life expanded again into newly available spaces. Forests regrew on landscapes once covered by lava flows or cleared by advancing ice. Reefs rebuilt themselves after ocean chemistry shifted. Grasslands spread across regions where tree cover had diminished. Species that endured periods of scarcity developed traits that allowed them to survive in harsher conditions. Those that thrived in the aftermath often possessed characteristics that enabled them to exploit new resources or adjust quickly to altered environments. This pattern of contraction and expansion shaped the trajectory of evolution, ensuring that no ecosystem remained static for long. Climate cycles continued to play a central role in these transitions. As Earth's orbit shifted and its tilt varied over tens of thousands of years, the distribution of sunlight across the planet changed. Ice advanced during cooler periods, drawing water from the oceans and lowering sea levels. When temperatures rose again, ice retreated, sea levels climbed, and coastlines shifted inland. These cycles affected the availability of habitats, forcing organisms to migrate, adapt, or disappear. Forests stretched northward during warm phases and contracted during cold ones. Grasslands expanded when climates dried, encouraging the evolution of grazing animals and the predators that followed them. Each shift reshaped the living world in ways that reflected the interplay between life and the planet's deep rhythms. Volcanic activity, though less globally disruptive than the vast outpourings of Earth's earlier eras, continued to influence life. Eruptions altered local environments, creating new land or devastating existing habitats. Ash clouds affected regional climates by cooling the atmosphere temporarily. Nutrient-rich ash and lava eventually broke down into soils that supported new communities of plants. These cycles of destruction and renewal created mosaics of ecosystems across continents, each at a different stage of development, depending on when the last disturbance occurred. Such patchwork landscapes encouraged diversification, as organisms adapted to a wide range of conditions even within small geographic areas. Ocean systems likewise remained responsive to the planet's motion. Changes in salinity, temperature, and wind patterns shifted the flow of currents that distributed nutrients throughout the seas. When currents altered their paths, regions that once supported abundant life could become barren, while other areas grew rich with upwelling nutrients. Marine species adjusted their ranges accordingly. Some evolved to withstand colder or warmer waters. Others adapted to changes in the availability of food. These shifting conditions encouraged new evolutionary experiments, shaping the diversity of marine life in ways that reflected Earth's ongoing transformation. As ecosystems reorganized after each period of stress, new forms of life emerged to fill ecological roles left vacant by species that had declined or vanished. Some of the most successful groups in Earth's history rose during these times of recovery. Mammals diversified after a major extinction event, exploring ecological niches ranging from burrowing insectivores to large grazing animals. Birds evolved into countless forms adapted to different environments, from forests to plains to open water. Reptiles, amphibians, insects, and plants all followed similar patterns, with each group developing new traits in response to opportunities created by environmental change. Through each rise and fall, Earth demonstrated a remarkable continuity. The forces guiding its evolution, continental drift, volcanic activity, atmospheric variation, and the flow of oceans, remained active across billions of years. They formed a backdrop against which life adapted over and over again. These processes did not prevent the development of complex ecosystems. They shaped those ecosystems, driving innovation and encouraging resilience. Life persisted not because the planet offered stability, but because it offered change. In every era, the living world adapted to the conditions created by Earth's restlessness. Even large-scale disruptions became part of a broader pattern that supported long-term diversity. Species rose, ecosystems shifted, and new forms emerged. Through this continuous cycle of pressure and renewal, life deepened its relationship with the planet, becoming more varied and interconnected with each chapter of Earth's unfolding story. Early humans arose during a time when Earth's climates were anything but consistent. Ice sheets advanced and retreated across northern regions. Rainfall patterns shifted, transforming dense forests into open grasslands, and then back into forests again. Rivers changed course as continents rose or subsided slightly under the weight of ice. These changes unfolded over thousands of years, slow in human terms, yet swift compared to the millions of years that shaped earlier eras. In this shifting world, human ancestors faced pressures that demanded flexibility. They needed to recognize new opportunities quickly, remember past conditions, and adjust their behavior as landscapes changed. The environments that shaped early humans were neither stable nor predictable. That instability became a force that guided their evolution in profound ways. The expansion of grasslands played a significant role in this process. As climates dried in some regions, forests retreated, creating wide open spaces where visibility increased and resources were dispersed. In these landscapes, upright walking became advantageous. It allowed early humans to travel long distances efficiently and to scan horizons for food, predators, or shelter. Standing upright also reduced exposure to direct sunlight, helping the body manage heat more effectively in open, warm environments. These traits did not evolve for a specific purpose. They emerged because individuals who could move and see effectively across changing terrain had greater chances of survival. Climate fluctuations also encouraged dietary flexibility. When fruits or forest vegetation became scarce, early humans turned to other food sources such as roots, nuts, seeds, and eventually meat. This shift required new tools for processing food and new strategies for obtaining it. Hands evolved with greater precision, allowing individuals to shape stones into cutting tools. These tools made it possible to access new types of nutrients, including those locked within bones or tough plants. A broader diet supported larger brains, which in turn helped humans interpret their environments, remember past events, and plan for the future. The connection between environmental variability and cognitive development became one of the most defining aspects of human evolution. Social cooperation grew in importance as conditions shifted. Surviving in uncertain environments required sharing knowledge about resources, dangers, and seasonal patterns. Groups that communicated effectively could locate water during dry periods, find shelter when temperatures dropped, or avoid predators that followed migrating herds. Cooperation supported child rearing as well, giving young individuals more time to learn complex behaviors. This extended period of learning reinforced the value of memory, imitation, and teaching, abilities that allowed human groups to respond collectively to environmental changes. Social bonds became a source of stability in a world where landscapes and climates shifted frequently. As ice ages advanced, early humans adapted to colder regions by creating clothing, using fire for warmth, and developing shelters that could withstand harsh conditions. When climates warmed again, they adjusted once more, taking advantage of forests that returned or rivers that flooded with seasonal rains. Each transition required careful observation. Groups learned to track animal migrations, anticipate weather changes, and recognize edible plants across different environments. These skills deepened their relationship with the landscape, making them not simply inhabitants of their surroundings, but active interpreters of a world in motion. The spread of humans across continents reflected this adaptability. As climates opened new routes or closed others, populations followed game animals, explored new regions, and encountered unfamiliar challenges. They crossed deserts when rains temporarily replenished water sources. They traversed mountain passes during warm periods that reduced snow cover. They followed coastlines that shifted gradually as sea levels rose or fell. Their movements mirrored the planet's own transformations, weaving human history into the geological rhythms that shaped every corner of Earth. Even as early humans faced these challenges, they also influenced their environments. Controlled use of fire changed vegetation patterns, making landscapes more open and supporting the spread of certain plants. Hunting practices affected animal populations, altering the balance of ecosystems. These interactions were not on the scale of later human influence, but they marked the beginning of a reciprocal relationship between humans and the planet. The environment shaped human adaptation, and human innovation began, in small ways, to shape the environment in return. Through all these changes, one constant remained. Humans did not evolve in a stable world. They evolved in a world that demanded awareness, creativity, and cooperation. The planet's restlessness encouraged traits that allowed humans to adapt to new conditions, pass knowledge across generations, and recognize patterns in shifting landscapes. These abilities would become the foundation for everything that followed, linking the story of humanity to the deep rhythms of Earth itself. As human ancestors became more skilled at interpreting their surroundings, adaptation shifted from being purely biological to increasingly cultural. Tools grew more sophisticated, shelters more resilient, and strategies for survival more varied. Flexibility became humanity's defining advantage on a planet that continued to reshape itself. Rather than depending on narrow environmental niches, humans learned to create conditions that supported their needs. This shift allowed them to thrive in deserts, forests, plains, and eventually cold northern regions, where earlier forms of life could not have survived without extensive adaptation. The Restless Planet encouraged a species capable of restlessness in mind, innovation, and behavior. Hunting and gathering practices expanded human understanding of seasonal cycles. Groups learned when herds would migrate, when certain plants would ripen, and where water would be found at different times of year. This knowledge was shared through stories, rituals, and instruction, forming an early human memory that stretched beyond the lifespan of any individual. Humans developed a sense of time that connected past observations to future expectations, enabling planning on scales longer than a single season. This long-range perspective gave human communities stability even when landscapes transformed around them. As climates fluctuated, periods of abundance alternated with scarcity. These changes encouraged experimentation with new forms of tool-making. Stone blades grew sharper, spears became more precise. Clothing made from animal skins provided protection in colder regions. Fire, once used primarily for warmth and cooking, became a tool for altering landscapes. Controlled burns cleared brush, encouraged the growth of new plants, and made hunting easier. Each innovation reflected a deeper ability to observe environmental patterns and respond creatively to them. When modern humans emerged, they inherited not only biological traits suited to variability, but cultural systems that amplified their ability to adapt. Language enabled communication with nuance and complexity, allowing groups to share detailed knowledge about landscapes, weather patterns, and animal behavior. This exchange strengthened cooperation and helped communities navigate uncertain conditions. Over time, humans formed networks that extended across great distances, sharing objects, ideas, and stories that carried insights from one region to another. These networks supported mobility, making it easier to move when climates changed or when resources shifted. Human movement across continents mirrored the planet's own dynamism. As ice sheets retreated, new corridors opened for migration. Rivers carved fresh paths through valleys, creating routes that guided groups into unfamiliar territories. Coastlines changed shape as sea levels rose after glacial periods. Humans followed these shifting boundaries, adapting their tools and strategies to match new ecosystems. They crossed deserts during brief wet phases, followed herds across grasslands that expanded during warm intervals, and settled near rivers that sustained life even when surrounding lands grew dry. Each movement reflected both opportunity and necessity, shaped by the planet's ongoing transformation. In this period, humans became increasingly skilled at shaping their environments in return. They used fire to maintain open landscapes, encouraged the growth of plants they found useful, and hunted selectively based on seasonal patterns. These practices were not deliberate attempts to control nature on a large scale, but they nonetheless influenced ecosystems in subtle ways. Forests opened in places where fires recurred. Grasslands spread where grazing animals thrived. Human presence became one of many factors interacting with climate, geology, and biological processes. The line between adaptation to nature and influence upon it grew more fluid. Social structures evolved to support survival in unpredictable environments. Groups formed alliances, shared resources during times of scarcity, and developed cultural norms that guided cooperation. Rituals and traditions encoded environmental knowledge, passing it reliably from one generation to the next. Cooperation allowed humans to respond collectively to abrupt changes, whether caused by shifting rainfall, advancing ice, or the appearance of new predators. In these systems, the strength of the group increased the chances of success for every individual. Art and symbolic expression emerged during this era, offering insight into how humans perceived their world. Cave paintings, carvings, and early musical instruments suggest that humans were not only responding to environmental pressures but reflecting upon them. They observed patterns in animal movements, celestial cycles, and seasonal changes. These reflections, expressed through art, reinforced their understanding of the environment and deepened their connection to the landscapes they inhabited. Creativity became a tool for interpreting the planet's rhythms, anchoring human experience within a world that never stopped moving. By the time humans spread across every continent except Antarctica, they had become masters of adaptation. They carried with them a long tradition of responding to change, shaped by a planet where transformation was constant. The environments they encountered varied widely, yet the underlying skill remained the same: the ability to read landscapes, recognize opportunity, anticipate challenges, and respond through imagination and cooperation. This adaptability, born from millions of years of environmental instability, prepared them for the next great transformation, one in which humans would reshape the planet as profoundly as the planet had shaped them. As human societies grew more complex, the relationship between people and the planet deepened. Settlements formed in regions where climates supported reliable food sources, along river valleys, near coasts, and on fertile plains shaped by millennia of sediment deposition. These locations made it possible to cultivate plants, domesticate animals, and build stable communities. Yet even in these early stages of settlement, Earth's restlessness remained a guiding force. Rivers changed course, sometimes flooding or abandoning the fields people depended on. Periodic droughts reshaped harvests and forced migrations. Volcanic eruptions enriched soils but also destroyed settlement. Humans learned to respond with strategies that balanced opportunity and risk, relying on observation, cooperation, and ingenuity. Agriculture transformed human interaction with the land. Instead of simply adapting to the environment, humans began modifying it in deliberate ways. They irrigated dry fields, diverted streams, and planted crops that grew well in specific climates. These practices required a detailed understanding of seasonal patterns, soil conditions, and the behavior of plants. As communities expanded, they developed tools that increased productivity, plows, sickles, and grinding stones that made it possible to feed larger populations. With more dependable food supplies, societies grew in size and complexity. Roles within communities diversified. Some individuals focused on farming, while others specialized in crafting tools, building structures, or managing resources. Over time, settlements evolved into cities. Their development reflected both the opportunities and the challenges presented by Earth's shifting systems. Cities flourished along rivers that provided transportation and fertile lands. They grew near coasts where trade could connect distant regions. In these hubs, knowledge accumulated about astronomy, mathematics, weather patterns, and the cycles of seasons. People tracked the movements of the sun and stars to predict planting times and to anticipate changes in climate. These observations echoed the long tradition of reading the landscape, now applied to understanding the planet's larger rhythms. Human influence on the environment expanded as societies grew. Forests were cleared to make space for fields and settlements. Wetlands were drained, and terraces were carved into hillsides to increase farmland. These changes altered local climates, affecting rainfall, soil quality, and the distribution of species. Humans introduced new plants and animals into regions where they had never existed, sometimes enhancing food supplies, sometimes disrupting ecosystems. The planet responded to these changes in ways that were subtle at first: slight shifts in temperature, changes in vegetation patterns, or alterations in the timing of seasonal events. The relationship between humans and the planet had entered a new phase, one defined by mutual influence. Trade networks extended across continents, linking societies in distant regions with goods, ideas, and technologies. These connections allowed knowledge about the environment to spread widely. Innovations such as irrigation canals, metal tools, and storage methods for food helped people adapt to varied climates and landscapes. Yet even the most advanced societies remained vulnerable to the planet's larger forces. Prolonged droughts challenged agricultural systems. Earthquakes damaged cities built along tectonic boundaries. Volcanic eruptions disrupted trade networks and altered global temperatures. Floods reshaped fertile lands. Societies that endured these events did so by developing strategies for resilience, storing surplus food, building protective structures, or relocating to safer regions when necessary. Civilizations rose and fell alongside these environmental challenges. Some flourished for centuries, supported by stable climates and abundant resources. Others collapsed when changing conditions outpaced their ability to adapt. Soil erosion, deforestation, and overuse of land weakened some agricultural societies. Shifts in monsoon patterns affected others, while volcanic eruptions briefly cooled the climate and reduced harvests across large regions. These changes reminded humanity that despite innovations and expanding influence, the planet's deep rhythms continued to guide the conditions of life. Yet each challenge also inspired advancements. People developed new farming techniques, engineered more resilient buildings, and crafted vessels capable of crossing vast oceans. They expanded their understanding of wind patterns, ocean currents, and seasonal cycles. These insights allowed human societies to grow more interconnected, resilient, and resourceful. Cultural traditions evolved to honor the forces of nature, reflecting reverence for the Earth's power and recognition of humanity's dependence on its stability. As societies entered more recent eras, their influence on the planet increased dramatically. Populations grew, cities expanded, and technologies transformed landscapes on an unprecedented scale. Humans began extracting resources that had formed over millions of years, altering the chemistry of the atmosphere and oceans. Still, the fundamental relationship remained the same. Earth changed, and humans adapted, even as they shaped the planet in return. The story of humanity became woven tightly into the story of the Earth, a story defined by transformation, resilience, and the enduring motion of a restless planet. The pace of human influence on the planet accelerated as societies developed technologies that could reshape entire landscapes. With the discovery of new energy sources, people built machines capable of moving Earth, transforming rivers, and harvesting resources at scales far beyond what earlier generations could imagine. Forests that had stood for thousands of years were cleared within decades. Mines reached deep into the crust, pulling minerals and metals from layers shaped long before humans existed. These changes altered not only local environments, but also regional and global systems. Yet even as human activity expanded, the planet continued to move according to its own internal rhythms, responding to pressure and change in ways both subtle and profound. As populations grew, cities spread across coastlines, river deltas, plains, and mountain valleys. These centers of human activity depended on predictable access to water, fertile soil, and stable climates. But Earth's natural variability remained present. Rivers still flooded and shifted course. Storms intensified or weakened depending on larger atmospheric cycles. Droughts arrived unexpectedly, challenging agricultural systems. Earthquakes reminded societies of the tectonic forces that shaped the ground beneath them. Even in technologically advanced cities, people experienced the planet's deep movements, a continuity connecting modern life to ancient geological processes. Human industry added new factors to these interactions. The combustion of fuels released gases into the atmosphere that altered its composition. These changes affected how heat was absorbed and distributed across the globe, shifting temperature patterns and influencing rainfall. Oceans absorbed a portion of these gases, changing their chemistry in ways that affected marine ecosystems. Ice sheets responded to rising temperatures by melting and raising sea levels, altering coastlines that had once seemed stable. These shifts did not begin as sudden crises. They accumulated gradually, like many of Earth's earlier transformations, until their effects became large enough to shape environments across continents. Technology enabled humans to monitor these changes with increasing precision. Instruments measured atmospheric composition, sea level, temperature trends, and the movement of tectonic plates. Satellites observed the planet's surface from orbit, revealing patterns that had once been invisible. Through these observations, people gained a deeper understanding of Earth's interconnected systems, how oceans influence climate, how forests regulate water cycles, how glaciers store and release fresh water, and how the atmosphere responds to changes in land and sea. This growing knowledge mirrored the ancient human practice of reading the landscape, now expanded to a global scale. Yet understanding did not erase vulnerability. Communities in low-lying coastal regions faced rising seas. Regions dependent on stable rainfall patterns encountered unpredictable droughts or intense storms. Shifts in temperature affected agriculture, wildlife, and water availability. Some environments changed too quickly for certain species to adapt, leading to declines or local extinctions. Others expanded into new territories as climate shifted, creating new ecological interactions. These changes reflected the complex relationship between human activity and Earth's natural processes, each shaping the other in an evolving balance. Amid these challenges, humans developed new strategies for resilience. Some societies rebuilt coastlines with barriers designed to hold back rising waters. Others restored wetlands that absorbed floods or planted forests to stabilize soil and support local climates. Technological advancements allowed for more efficient use of water, renewable energy sources, and agricultural techniques adapted to changing conditions. These efforts represented a continuation of humanity's long tradition of adapting to the planet's motion, now informed by global knowledge and collaborative planning. Migration patterns began to shift as well. Just as early humans moved in response to climate changes, modern populations adjusted to new environmental realities. Some relocated from areas where water grew scarce. Others moved away from coasts where storms intensified. New settlements arose in regions once considered remote or inhospitable. These movements were not uniform, but they reflected the ongoing necessity of responding to a dynamic planet. Earth's restlessness continued to guide human behavior, reminding societies that stability has always been temporary. Even as humans reshaped ecosystems, many recognized the importance of preserving the planet's natural systems. Efforts to protect forests, restore coral reefs, and conserve biodiversity emerged from an understanding that Earth's resilience depends on the health of its interconnected systems. Scientists studied ancient climate cycles, volcanic activity, and extinction events to better understand the long-term patterns that shape the planet. These insights helped frame humanity's role not as controllers of Earth's processes but as participants within them. Through all these developments, the core relationship remained unchanged. Earth moved, transformed, and responded to the forces within and around it. Humans adapted, reflected, and innovated. The story of life on this restless planet continued, complex, intertwined, and shaped by the enduring motion of a world that has never truly stood still. Humanity's growing influence on Earth did not weaken the planet's natural forces. Instead, it created a new layer of interaction, a meeting point between geological time and human time. As cities expanded, landscapes transformed, and technologies advanced, the planet continued its slow cycles beneath the surface. Tectonic plates drifted at the same steady pace they had maintained for hundreds of millions of years. Volcanoes released heat from the mantle. Ocean currents shifted in response to changing temperatures and salinity. These deep processes formed the background against which human history unfolded, shaping opportunities and challenges in ways that often became visible only across generations. Earthquakes remained reminders of the power contained within the crust. Regions that had experienced centuries of calm could suddenly shift, altering coastlines, redirecting rivers, or reshaping mountain slopes. These events disrupted human settlements, yet they also reflected the same motions that had long created fertile valleys, mineral-rich mountains, and sheltered basins. The stability people sought in the land beneath them was always temporary, defined by intervals between movements rather than by an absence of motion. Understanding this helped societies develop building practices that responded to the planet's deep activity, blending geological awareness with architectural skill. Volcanic eruptions continued to influence climate and ecosystems, even in eras marked by advanced technology. Some eruptions cooled the atmosphere by injecting fine particles into the upper layers of air, subtly altering global temperatures for several years. Others enriched soils with nutrients that supported agriculture long after the eruptions ended. These dual effects, destruction followed by renewal, echoed patterns that had shaped life for billions of years. Humans observed these cycles with increasing precision, using scientific tools to measure gases, track seismic activity, and study the chemistry of rocks. Yet the underlying processes remained the same natural rhythms that had been active since Earth's formation. Oceans, too, demonstrated their enduring connection to planetary change. Sea levels rose and fell in response to melting ice, thermal expansion, and long-term shifts in global temperature. Coastal communities adapted by elevating structures, moving inland, or engineering barriers to hold back the tides. Scientists monitored the movement of warm and cold currents, recognizing how these flows affected weather patterns across continents. Changes in ocean temperature influenced where fish migrated, how storms formed, and how ecosystems responded. These effects linked distant regions in ways that highlighted the interconnectedness of the entire planet. Atmospheric patterns reflected both natural cycles and human influence. Winds carried moisture across continents, shaping the timing of monsoons, the spread of deserts, and the formation of temperate forests. Seasonal shifts, influenced by Earth's tilt and orbit, continued to guide agricultural activity and animal behavior. At the same time, changes in atmospheric composition, driven by human activity, altered how heat was absorbed and released. This combination of natural and human-driven factors created complex outcomes, requiring societies to observe their surroundings closely and respond with foresight and cooperation. Through these developments, one truth persisted: life on Earth has always depended on adaptation. Humans, like every other species, found success by responding creatively to the world around them. They built tools, formed communities, and shared knowledge that helped them navigate shifting conditions. As the planet continued its cycles of motion, humans expanded their understanding of long-term processes, recognizing how volcanic activity, ocean circulation, atmospheric shifts, and tectonic forces interacted to shape daily experiences. This understanding became a foundation for planning, resilience, and innovation. Yet, even with expanding knowledge, Earth's rhythms remained larger than any single society or era. The planet's internal heat continued to rise slowly through the crust. Water circulated through oceans and atmosphere in patterns influenced by forces both ancient and immediate. Continents drifted a few centimeters each year, carrying civilizations along paths shaped long before their arrival. These motions underscored the continuity of Earth's story, a story in which change, not permanence, formed the central theme. Humanity's place within this story was unique. People were not passive observers but active participants, capable of responding, influencing, and imagining futures shaped by their choices. Still, the planet remained the larger context, a dynamic world whose restlessness had always been the engine of transformation. Understanding this relationship allowed humans to appreciate both their potential and their limits, grounding their achievements within the broader movement of a planet that had never stopped evolving. As the modern era unfolded, humanity's ability to observe the planet deepened in ways that previous generations could not have imagined. Satellites traced the motion of clouds, measured the temperature of oceans, and mapped the shifting contours of continents. Instruments placed deep in the sea recorded the slow pulse of currents, while sensors buried in the ground detected the subtle tensions that preceded earthquakes. High above the surface, probes monitored the chemistry of the atmosphere, tracking how gases moved and interacted across hemispheres. These tools revealed Earth not as a static backdrop, but as a complex and dynamic system whose rhythms were global, interconnected, and constantly evolving. Through these observations, patterns became clearer. Scientists recognized how volcanic eruptions in one region could affect temperatures around the world. They understood how warm waters in distant oceans could guide the formation of storms thousands of kilometers away. They learned how the position of the jet stream influenced droughts, floods, and the shifting boundaries between ecosystems. These insights did not eliminate uncertainty, but they illuminated the vast web of interactions that defined the planet. Knowledge expanded from local understanding to planetary awareness, reflecting humanity's growing ability to interpret Earth's deep rhythms. At the same time, human activity continued to reshape landscapes, waters, and air. Forests were cleared to make space for expanding cities and agriculture. Rivers were redirected to support industry and irrigation. Minerals were extracted from deep beneath the surface to power technologies that connected societies across great distances. These changes brought prosperity and innovation, but also introduced new challenges. As systems became more interconnected, disruptions in one region often carried consequences far beyond their origins. Droughts in agricultural zones affected food supplies across continents. Rising sea levels influenced global trade networks. Changes in atmospheric composition altered weather patterns that guided the distribution of ecosystems. Yet the planet's natural forces remained equally influential. Earth's magnetic field shifted subtly over time, influenced by motions in the liquid outer core. Tectonic plates continued their slow collisions and separations, shaping mountain ranges and ocean floors. The mantle circulated heat upward in waves that took millions of years to complete. These movements were imperceptible on human timescales, yet they shaped the environments in which societies lived. The world remained in motion even when landscapes appeared still. Beneath fields, forests, and cities, the crust carried the imprint of ancient collisions, volcanic eruptions, and seismic shifts. Human resilience continued to reflect ancient patterns of adaptation. Communities adjusted to new environmental realities by building infrastructure suited to changing conditions. In regions prone to storms, buildings were strengthened. In areas facing rising temperatures, new agricultural methods were developed, and water resources were managed more carefully. Scientific knowledge helped societies anticipate risks and respond more effectively, drawing on a long tradition of observing the environment and interpreting its signals. These modern responses echoed the same principles that guided early humans: awareness, cooperation, and the ability to imagine solutions beyond immediate challenges. As global communication expanded, societies learned to share knowledge rapidly. Insights from one region could inform decisions in another, helping communities prepare for environmental events shaped by global processes. This exchange deepened humanity's connection to the planet, encouraging a sense of shared responsibility for the systems that supported life. People began restoring degraded landscapes, protecting threatened species, and studying how ecosystems functioned at multiple scales. These efforts reflected an understanding that the health of the planet and the well-being of human societies were intertwined. Through this growing awareness, a new relationship with Earth emerged, one grounded in the recognition that humans were part of a larger story written across geological time. The planet's restlessness had shaped life since its earliest moments. It had guided the evolution of species, the formation of continents, and the rhythms of climate. Now, humans faced the task of living within these rhythms while acknowledging their own influence on them. This realization invited reflection, humility, and a renewed appreciation for the planet's complexity. Even as technology advanced and societies changed, the fundamental truth remained. Earth was a world in constant motion. Its surface shifted, its climates evolved, its oceans circulated, and its atmosphere responded to countless interactions. Humanity's future would depend on how well it understood and respected these dynamics. For the story of life on this restless planet was not finished. It continued to unfold, shaped by forces ancient and new, guided by the enduring interplay between the planet and those who called it home. Understanding Earth as a restless planet encouraged humanity to look deeper into the forces that shaped its history. People began studying rocks not just as building materials but as records of ancient environment. Layers of sediment revealed when oceans had risen and fallen. Fossils captured moments when life flourished or declined. Volcanic deposits spoke of eruptions that altered climates for decades. By reading these traces, scientists pieced together a timeline that stretched far beyond human memory, showing how landscapes, ecosystems, and climates had transformed again and again. This long perspective offered insight into the present, revealing that many of the changes occurring in modern times echoed patterns that had unfolded repeatedly across geological ages. These discoveries shifted the way people perceived stability. What seemed permanent, mountains, coastlines, forests, was revealed to be temporary when viewed across millions of years. Continents had once been clustered into a single vast landmass, only to drift apart into the arrangement known today. Regions that were now deserts had once been covered by oceans. Places that supported forests and grasslands had been submerged under ice sheets. These revelations highlighted the continuity of Earth's motion, reminding humanity that landscapes were chapters in an unfolding story, rather than fixed features of the planet. Scientists also uncovered evidence of how life responded to these long cycles. Fossil records revealed bursts of diversification following major extinctions, showing how new species emerged to fill ecological spaces left empty by those that had vanished. They found examples of organisms that adapted to dramatic shifts in temperature, sea level, and atmospheric composition. These patterns demonstrated that life had always been intertwined with Earth's deep rhythms, shaped by pressures that encouraged innovation and resilience. The planet's restlessness, once seen as a source of danger, became recognized as a driving force behind the richness of life. Technological advancements allowed humanity to explore areas once inaccessible. Drilling deep into ocean floors revealed sediments that recorded millions of years of climate cycles. Ice cores, extracted from polar regions, preserved bubbles of ancient air, offering direct evidence of how atmospheric composition had changed over time. Spacecraft orbiting Earth gathered continuous data on weather systems, sea ice, forest cover, and volcanic activity. These tools made it possible to observe Earth as a single, interconnected system, one in which changes in one region often influenced processes far away. This expanded perspective encouraged a growing awareness of how delicate certain balances were. Although Earth had endured asteroids, volcanic eruptions, and dramatic shifts in climate, its systems operated within ranges that supported life. Temperature, atmospheric composition, and ocean chemistry all fluctuated naturally, yet they stayed within limits that allowed ecosystems to thrive. Human activities, by altering these conditions rapidly, added new variables that the planet had not experienced on similar timescales. Scientists recognized that understanding Earth's long-term patterns was essential for predicting how ecosystems and climates might respond to modern pressures. In response, communities began developing approaches that blended scientific knowledge with ancient traditions of environmental awareness. Indigenous cultures had long understood the importance of observing seasonal patterns, caring for ecosystems, and respecting the forces of nature. These perspectives, combined with modern scientific tools, supported practices that emphasized sustainability and resilience. Restoring wetlands helped buffer coastlines against storms. Replanting forests stabilized soils and supported biodiversity. Managing water resources thoughtfully ensured that rivers and lakes continued to sustain life even in times of drought. These efforts reflected an appreciation of the planet's complexity and a recognition that humanity's well-being was tied to the stability of natural systems. Education and collaboration became essential parts of this emerging relationship with Earth. Schools taught children about ecosystems, climate cycles, and the interconnected nature of the planet's systems. International cooperation formed around protecting oceans, reducing pollution, and conserving species threatened by changing conditions. These efforts did not eliminate challenges, but they strengthened the capacity of societies to respond to them thoughtfully. Through all this learning, one idea gained prominence. Earth was not simply a place where life happened to exist. It was an active participant in the story of life, shaping environments, guiding evolution, and responding to both natural forces and human influence. The planet's restlessness was not a flaw. It was a defining characteristic, a source of creativity, diversity, and transformation. Humanity's growing understanding of this truth marked a new chapter in its relationship with the world. By recognizing the patterns that guided Earth's history, people gained insight into their own future, learning how to live within the planet's enduring motion while contributing to the stability needed for life to flourish. Humanity's expanding knowledge of Earth gradually reshaped how people understood their place within its systems. Rather than viewing themselves as separate from the planet's processes, many began to see human societies as threads woven into a much larger tapestry, one shaped by shifting climates, moving continents, circulating oceans, and evolving life. This recognition encouraged a growing respect for the delicate balances that supported ecosystems. It also highlighted the responsibility that came with the ability to influence those balances on a global scale. As awareness deepened, a new perspective emerged, one that embraced both the planet's capacity for change and humanity's role in shaping the future. This awareness grew alongside rapid advancements in technology, which offered unprecedented insight into the forces that governed Earth. Long-term data revealed how temperatures fluctuated, how ice caps expanded and retreated, and how atmospheric circulation patterns shifted across decades. Scientists developed models that simulated ocean currents and wind systems, showing how they might respond to changes in temperature or atmospheric composition. These models were imperfect, yet they captured enough of the planet's behavior to guide decision-making and highlight the importance of maintaining the stability that supported life. The more people learned, the clearer it became that human choices could influence global processes in ways once reserved for geological or cosmic events. Societies began exploring methods to live in closer alignment with Earth's natural systems. Buildings were designed to use sunlight more efficiently. Cities incorporated green spaces that cooled air, absorbed water, and supported biodiversity. Renewable energy sources, wind, sunlight, moving water, were developed to reduce reliance on fuels that altered the atmosphere. Agricultural practices shifted toward methods that preserved soil, conserved water, and supported the health of ecosystems. These innovations reflected a desire to work with the planet's rhythms rather than against them, recognizing that resilience depended on respecting the natural patterns that had shaped Earth for billions of years. At the same time, cultures around the world drew inspiration from ancient understandings of the environment. Many indigenous traditions had long emphasized the importance of observing the land, valuing balance, and recognizing the interconnectedness of all living things. These perspectives resonated with modern scientific findings, offering insights into sustainable stewardship and long-term thinking. Together, scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom helped frame a more holistic understanding of Earth, a view that honored both empirical evidence and lived experience. Across continents, communities experimented with new forms of cooperation. Nations shared data on climate patterns, ocean health, and biodiversity. They collaborated on projects to protect migratory species, restore damaged ecosystems, and monitor environmental change. These efforts were not driven solely by necessity but by an emerging sense of global citizenship, a recognition that the planet's systems connected everyone, regardless of borders. Weather patterns did not stop at political lines. Ocean currents linked distant shores. Atmospheric changes influenced climates across the globe. This interdependence reinforced the idea that caring for the planet required collective action. Education played a central role in shaping this shift. Children learned about the water cycle, the movement of tectonic plates, the importance of biodiversity, and the role of ecosystems in maintaining balance. They learned how human activities influenced the planet and how thoughtful choices could support stability. This knowledge encouraged curiosity and responsibility, nurturing generations more attuned to the planet's needs and more capable of imagining solutions to complex environmental challenges. It also fostered a sense of wonder, an appreciation for the beauty and complexity of a world shaped by slow, powerful forces acting across deep time. Even as human understanding grew, Earth continued its quiet transformations. Glaciers advanced and retreated in response to long-term cycles. Rivers carved new paths through mountains. Coastlines shifted with rising and falling seas. Forests expanded in some regions while shrinking in others. These changes reminded humanity that the planet remained dynamic, shaped by forces older than civilization itself. They offered perspective, that human influence was significant but not absolute, that the planet's rhythms persisted beneath the flux of human activity. Amid these changes, a broader philosophy emerged, one that viewed Earth not as a resource to be consumed but as a partner in the story of life. This perspective encouraged humility, curiosity, and gratitude. It inspired people to protect what remained wild, restore what had been damaged, and design with the future in mind. Humanity began to see itself not as separate from the planet's motion, but as one expression of it, an organism born from Earth's long history, capable of reflection and responsibility. Through this deepening relationship, people found a renewed sense of purpose, to participate in the ongoing evolution of a planet that had shaped them, and to steward its systems so that life, in all its forms, could continue to flourish on a world that had never stopped changing. As humanity entered an age of unprecedented capability, a deeper understanding of Earth's long cycles became essential. People now recognized that the planet operated across overlapping timescales, moments shaped by storms, decades shaped by climate trends, millennia shaped by glacial rhythms, and millions of years shaped by shifting continents. This awareness reshaped how societies thought about responsibility. Decisions made within a single lifetime could influence systems that would echo far into the future. The planet's restlessness was no longer simply a backdrop for human activity. It had become a guide for how to think about stability, resilience, and the legacy left for generations yet to come. Efforts to understand these long cycles expanded into ambitious global projects. Networks of sensors measured ocean temperatures, atmospheric movement, and soil chemistry across continents. Observatories monitored volcanic regions for signs of pressure building deep below. Satellites watched polar ice sheets, tracking the subtle shifts in thickness that hinted at long-term changes. These measurements created a picture of Earth as a living system, one in which oceans breathed heat in and out, forests pulsed with seasonal growth, and the atmosphere carried signals of distant events. The more humanity observed, the clearer it became that no single process acted alone. Every movement connected to another. This understanding encouraged a new kind of foresight. Cities began considering how rising seas might reshape coastlines not just in the next decade, but over the next century. Farmers adapted planting strategies based on shifting rainfall patterns informed by long-term climate cycles. Architects designed buildings to withstand stronger storms. Conservationists looked beyond preserving individual species, focusing instead on protecting entire ecosystems capable of responding to change. This forward-looking mindset grew from the recognition that Earth's restlessness was not a temporary challenge, but a permanent condition, and that thriving within it required imagination grounded in scientific insight. The study of geological and climatic history revealed another important pattern. Periods of rapid change, though unsettling, often sparked creativity and adaptation. Species that survived these transitions evolved traits that allowed them to flourish in new conditions. Ecosystems reorganized, forming new relationships and patterns of interaction. These insights inspired people to view environmental challenges not only through the lens of risk, but also through the lens of possibility. Renewable energy technologies, sustainable fisheries, regenerative agriculture, and green architecture were examples of solutions shaped by the desire to move with Earth's rhythms rather than resist them. At the same time, humanity became more aware of the value of preserving landscapes that retained deep ecological memory. Old-growth forests, coral reefs, wetlands, and ancient grasslands contained species and interactions shaped by thousands or millions of years. These environments provided stability in an era of change, offering food, shelter, and climate regulation for countless organisms, including humans. Protecting them became an act of stewardship, an acknowledgement that some systems could not be rebuilt once lost, and that they carried wisdom encoded in their structure and resilience. Cultural perspectives evolved as well. Art, literature, and philosophy began to reflect a growing reverence for Earth's complexity. People celebrated the migrations of animals, the cycles of seasons, the shaping of mountains, and the flowing of rivers as expressions of the planet's character. Traditions that honored the land, once marginalized in modern societies, regained appreciation as valuable sources of insight. Communities turned to ancestral practices that emphasized balance, mindful use of resources, and respect for nature's power. These cultural shifts fostered a deeper emotional connection to the planet, complementing scientific understanding with intuitive appreciation. Amid these developments, humanity continued to innovate. Scientists explored ways to predict volcanic activity more accurately, to restore damaged ecosystems, and to design materials inspired by natural processes. Engineers looked to the structures of plants and animals for ideas that improved efficiency and sustainability. Medical researchers studied organisms that had survived extreme conditions, hoping to uncover insights relevant to human health. Each advancement reflected the same underlying relationship. Earth shaped life, and life learned from Earth. Yet, even with expanding knowledge, humility remained essential. The planet's systems were vast, intricate, and often beyond complete understanding. Small shifts in ocean temperature could influence weather patterns across continents. Subtle changes in atmospheric chemistry could alter rainfall for generations. Recognizing these limits encouraged caution and patience. It reminded humanity that living on a restless planet required more than mastery. It required respect. In embracing this philosophy, people began to see themselves as partners in Earth's ongoing story, participants in a world defined by motion, interconnectedness, and continuous transformation. The planet's restlessness, once a source of uncertainty, became a source of perspective. It encouraged humanity to think beyond the present moment, to imagine futures shaped not by fear but by understanding, and to act with the awareness that their choices echoed across time on a world that was always quietly in motion. As humanity's understanding of Earth deepened, attention turned not only to the planet's vast systems but also to the subtle processes that shaped landscapes on more intimate scales. The slow weathering of mountains, the migration of dunes, the meandering of rivers, and the quiet accumulation of sediments in lakes all revealed how motion persisted even where the world seemed still. These processes unfolded over centuries rather than millennia, yet they reflected the same principles that govern tectonic plates and climate cycles. They demonstrated that every landscape, no matter how serene, was the product of unseen forces working steadily over time. Weathering, driven by wind, water, and temperature changes, sculpted rock faces and carved canyons. Raindrops split minerals grain by grain. Frost expanded in cracks, breaking stones into fragments that gravity carried downhill. Rivers transported these fragments, grinding them further as they flowed toward the sea. Along their paths, they shaped valleys, formed floodplains, and deposited fertile soil that nourished forests and grasslands. Even in densely populated areas, rivers continued their slow reshaping, adjusting their courses in response to storms, seasonal flows, and the shifting ground beneath them. Human attempts to confine them often revealed how powerful these quiet forces remained. Coastal regions showed similar patterns of continuous change. Waves sculpted cliffs, carried sand along shorelines, and built barrier islands that shifted with tides and storms. These landforms were temporary, yet they provided essential habitats for countless species. Mangroves, salt marshes, and dunes absorbed storm energy, filtering water and supporting biodiversity. When sea levels rose, coastlines moved inland, sometimes dramatically. Settlements that had once stood far from the shore found themselves at the edge of advancing waters. In other regions, land emerged slowly as sediments accumulated, creating new wetlands and habitats. These changes reminded people that even familiar places were impermanent expressions of Earth's long dance between land and sea. Forests offered another example of constant motion. Trees grew, fell, and decayed, nourishing soils that supported new generations. Fires, whether sparked by lightning or set intentionally for land management, cleared dense underbrush and encouraged renewal. Different species competed for sunlight and water, forming layers of canopy that shifted over time. Insects, fungi, and animals played essential roles in decomposition, pollination, and nutrient cycling. These interactions created resilient ecosystems that adapted to droughts, storms, and temperature shifts. Even though forests appeared stable from a human perspective, they were always adjusting, slowly, quietly, and with remarkable complexity. Deserts, too, showed dynamic behavior. Winds sculpted dunes that moved across the landscape, sometimes advancing over roads, fields, or settlements. Sandstorms reshaped surface features in a matter of hours, while more subtle changes occurred over decades. In some regions, deserts expanded during dry climate phases and contracted when rainfall increased. Plants and animals adapted to these fluctuations, with strategies that allowed them to survive in environments defined by scarcity. These adaptations revealed how life could flourish even where conditions seemed harsh, mirroring the planet's own ability to sustain complexity across diverse settings. Mountains embodied both stability and transformation. Their peaks rose because of tectonic uplift, yet they were continuously worn down by erosion. Glaciers carved valleys and sharpened ridges, leaving behind lakes and fertile soils when they retreated. Snowpack accumulated each winter and melted each spring, feeding rivers that supported ecosystems far downstream. Landslides reshaped slopes in moments, while the slow movement of rock layers transformed entire ranges over millions of years. Standing on a mountaintop offered a perspective on time itself, a reminder that even the most enduring features of the planet were part of an ongoing cycle of building and wearing away. These subtle yet persistent processes shaped human experience as well. Communities built near rivers depended on fertile soils, created by centuries of sediment deposition. Coastal societies adapted to shifting shorelines and changing tides. Mountain villages relied on meltwater and stable slopes, understanding the risks of landslides or avalanches. In every region, people learned to read the quiet signals of the landscape, the pattern of erosion on a hillside, the movement of water after storms, the growth of vegetation in changing seasons. These observations linked daily life to the planet's deeper rhythms, grounding human experience within Earth's continuous transformation. By recognizing these smaller-scale processes, humanity gained a richer understanding of the planet's character. Earth was not restless only in its grand movements, its drifting continents, rising mountains, and shifting climates. It was restless in every grain of sand carried by the wind, every drop of water shaping a riverbank, every root breaking through a stone. This constant motion, both immense and minute, formed the fabric of the world on which life evolved. And within this fabric, humans found not only challenges but also meaning, a reminder that change was the fundamental condition of a planet alive with energy and history. As humanity deepened its understanding of Earth's continuous movement, attention increasingly turned to how ecosystems maintained their balance amid constant change. Life on the planet had endured countless cycles of warming and cooling, rising and falling seas, shifting landscapes, and evolving climates. Through these transitions, ecosystems developed remarkable strategies to preserve stability, even when conditions fluctuated. This resilience emerged not from a lack of change, but from the ability to adapt within it, an ability rooted in diversity, cooperation, and the complex interactions among species. Biodiversity played a central role in this resilience. In ecosystems with many species, each organism contributed to essential functions such as pollination, nutrient cycling, soil formation, and the regulation of water and climate. If one species declined due to environmental stress, others often filled its role, preventing the ecosystem from collapsing. Forests with diverse tree species resisted disease more effectively than monocultures. Coral reefs with a variety of organisms recovered more quickly from storms or temperature shifts. Grasslands with multiple grasses and flowering plants sustained grazing animals even during periods of drought. Diversity acted as a buffer, absorbing shocks and maintaining stability in systems shaped by continual change. Interactions among species, whether cooperative or competitive, also contributed to ecosystem resilience. Pollinators and plants formed partnerships that supported entire food webs. Predators controlled herbivore populations, preventing overgrazing and protecting vegetation. Decomposers broke down organic matter, returning nutrients to the soil and maintaining the foundation of the food chain. These relationships created networks of interdependence that allowed ecosystems to reorganize themselves after disturbances. Even when fires, storms, or droughts altered the landscape, life found ways to rebuild, guided by connections among species that had evolved over millions of years. Migration became another essential strategy for resilience. As climates warmed or cooled, countless species moved across continents, following suitable conditions. Birds traveled thousands of kilometers each year to take advantage of seasonal abundance. Marine animals followed shifting currents rich in nutrients. Mammals migrated across plains in search of food and water. Plants spread their seeds through wind, water, and animals, gradually shifting their ranges as temperatures and rainfall patterns changed. These movements allowed species to survive in a world where stability was temporary and conditions constantly evolved. Some ecosystems even relied on disturbance to maintain their health. Fire-dependent forests used periodic burns to clear underbrush, release nutrients, and stimulate new growth. Floodplains depended on seasonal flooding to deposit fertile sediments and support diverse plant and animal communities. Coastal wetlands thrived through cycles of erosion and deposition, expanding or contracting as tides and storms reshaped shorelines. These disturbances were not disruptions. They were vital processes that sustained ecological balance and encouraged regeneration. Human societies, observing these patterns, began to understand that resilience required living in harmony with natural processes rather than attempting to halt them. Some cultures practiced controlled burning to mimic natural fires, maintaining healthy forests and grasslands. Others protected wetlands, recognizing their role in filtering water, absorbing storm surges, and supporting biodiversity. Agricultural practices evolved to rotate crops, preserve soil health, and encourage beneficial insects. These approaches reflected a growing appreciation of nature's dynamic resilience and the importance of working with, rather than against, Earth's continuous motion. As knowledge expanded, conservation efforts shifted from preserving single species to protecting entire ecosystems. Scientists emphasized the importance of maintaining connectivity between habitats, allowing species to migrate as climates shifted. Restoration projects focused on rebuilding the interactions among plants, animals, and microorganisms that created stability. Communities began reintroducing native species, restoring river flows, and protecting old-growth forests that stored carbon and supported diverse forms of life. These efforts recognized that the key to a thriving planet lay not in preventing change, but in preserving the systems that allowed life to adapt to it. Through this understanding, humanity gained new insight into its own place within Earth's ecosystems. People were not separate from the natural world. They were part of the same intricate web, shaped by the same forces and dependent on the same cycles. By studying resilience in nature, humans learned how to build resilience in their own communities. Through cooperation, diversity, adaptability, and respect for the processes that sustained life. In this way, Earth's quiet lessons became guides for the future, showing how life could flourish on a planet defined by movement, transformation, and the enduring rhythm of change. As ecosystems across the planet demonstrated their quiet resilience, humanity began to look inward, seeking to understand how individuals and communities could draw wisdom from the Earth's own patterns. People noticed that stability did not mean the absence of movement, but rather the presence of rhythms that supported renewal. Forests grew and shed leaves in cycles. Oceans circulated warmth and nutrients across vast distances. Even deserts, seemingly still, shifted with winds that sculpted dunes grain by grain. Within these slow, steady motions, there was a lesson about endurance, one that resonated with human experience as much as with the natural world. Communities found that resilience grew when they mirrored the diversity seen in ecosystems. Groups strengthened when they combined varied skills, perspectives, and traditions. Knowledge passed through generations created continuity, while new ideas helped societies adapt to changing circumstances. This blend of old and new, of memory and innovation, reflected the patterns found throughout nature. Species survived by holding on to what worked while adapting when conditions shifted. Humans, too, discovered that flexibility rooted in understanding offered a kind of stability even in uncertain times. The cycles of rest and activity in nature also offered guidance. Plants conserved energy during cold seasons and flourished when conditions warmed. Animals migrated, hibernated, or altered their behavior in response to environmental cues. Even rivers experienced periods of flood and calm, each essential to their long-term health. In observing these rhythms, people recognized the importance of finding their own balance, of alternating effort with rest, attention with reflection. On a planet where nothing remained constant, the ability to pause and restore strength became as vital as the ability to act. As night falls and the world grows quiet, the body follows its own natural rhythm, allowing calm to settle in much the same way the land rests between seasons. In many cultures, stories emerged that connected human well-being with the cycles of Earth. These stories spoke of mountains as symbols of patience, oceans as reminders of depth, and winds as expressions of change. They emphasized listening to nature, to one another, and to the quiet signals of the body. This listening encouraged clarity and steadiness, allowing people to respond to challenges with thoughtfulness rather than haste. It became a form of alignment with the planet's deeper rhythms, a way of moving through life with greater ease. Modern science offered its own confirmation of these ancient understandings. Researchers found that ecosystems function best when allowed to maintain their natural cycles. Wetlands protected coastlines, forests moderated temperatures and purified air, healthy soils stored carbon and supported food production. These benefits arose not from controlling nature, but from supporting its inherent processes. Humans discovered parallels in their own lives. Practices that nurtured well-being often involved moving in harmony with natural rhythms rather than trying to override them. Gentle routines, steady breathing, and moments of reflection provided calm within an ever-changing world, much as quiet periods in nature restored strength and balance. This connection between inner and outer resilience grew stronger as people explored ways to live more thoughtfully. Homes were designed to draw in natural light and circulate fresh air. Cities planted trees to cool streets and provide refuge for birds and insects. Communities restored rivers to their natural courses, allowing floodplains to absorb water and support biodiversity. These efforts reflected a growing understanding that human flourishing depended on recognizing the planet's patterns and learning from them. In the process, people found themselves feeling more grounded, more attuned to the quiet motions that shaped both Earth and their own lives. As the day's demands faded and individuals prepared for rest, these patterns offered comfort. The world continued its slow transformations, oceans circulating, forests breathing, mountains rising and wearing down, all without hurry. There was reassurance in this rhythm, a reminder that change did not need to be feared when met with calm awareness. Just as ecosystems restored themselves through cycles of renewal, humans found restoration in moments of stillness, allowing the mind to settle gently while the body followed familiar cues into sleep. With this sense of connection, people could drift into rest knowing they belonged to a planet defined by movement, continuity, and quiet resilience, a world whose steady rhythms had guided life from its earliest beginnings. Humanity's growing awareness of Earth's deep rhythms inspired a new way of thinking about progress. Rather than measuring advancement only through speed, expansion, or accumulation, societies began to recognize the value of harmony with natural systems. Progress could mean restoring rivers to flow freely, protecting forests that anchored climate patterns, or designing technologies that worked with energy already present in wind, sunlight, and moving water. This shift did not reject innovation, it reframed it. People saw that the most enduring solutions were often those that aligned with the planet's long-established processes. Communities that once struggled with recurring floods learned to build on higher ground, leaving room for rivers to rise and fall naturally. Coastal regions planted mangroves whose roots stabilized shorelines and absorbed the force of storms. Cities integrated parks, wetlands, and green corridors that cooled the air, filtered water, and provided refuge for wildlife. These choices improved daily life while reinforcing the resilience of the landscapes they touched. Instead of resisting change, societies learned to adapt with forethought, anticipating shifts in climate and developing strategies that strengthened both people and ecosystems. A deeper respect for cycles began to influence how humans approached food and water as well. Farmers adopted methods that enriched soil rather than depleting it. Rotating crops, planting cover vegetation, and reducing erosion helped maintain fertile ground even as weather patterns fluctuated. Water systems were redesigned to capture seasonal rains, replenish underground aquifers, and distribute resources efficiently during dry periods. These practices honored ancient knowledge while applying modern science, creating systems that could endure in a world where rainfall, temperature, and growing seasons no longer followed familiar patterns. Energy systems shifted in similar ways. Wind turbines turned with patterns shaped by atmospheric circulation. Solar panels captured light carried across space from the sun that had warmed Earth since its formation. Hydroelectric systems followed the flow of rivers, converting ancient gravitational forces into steady power. By embracing these natural rhythms, societies reduced their reliance on resources created over geological time and instead leaned on processes renewed daily. This transition reflected a broader realization that aligning with Earth's cycles did not limit human potential but expanded it. Cultural perspectives evolved alongside these changes. More people found meaning in reconnecting with landscapes shaped by deep time. Trails followed paths carved by glaciers. Parks protected valleys formed by ancient seas. Museums displayed fossils that revealed life's long history, inviting reflection on how each generation fit within a much older story. Artists and writers drew inspiration from geological formations, migrations of animals, and the changing light across seasons. These expressions deepened collective awareness of humanity's place within Earth's dynamic systems. Scientific research continued to uncover new layers of understanding. Studies of ancient climates helped predict how temperature shifts might influence modern ecosystems. Satellite observations tracked the growth of forests, the movement of deserts, and the melting of ice sheets. Oceanographers mapped currents that linked distant regions, showing how a change in one part of the world could ripple across continents. With each discovery, people gained clearer insight into the connections that held the planet together. This knowledge reinforced the importance of caring for systems whose stability supported life on scales far beyond individual experience. Through these developments, a central idea emerged with increasing clarity. Thriving on a restless planet required both humility and creativity. Humans could not control tectonic forces, ocean currents, or the slow drift of continents, but they could learn from these processes, studying their patterns, respecting their scale, and designing human systems that mirrored their resilience. This perspective encouraged cooperation across communities and nations, recognizing that Earth's challenges were shared, as were its opportunities for renewal. Even in moments of uncertainty, there was comfort in understanding the continuity of Earth's rhythms. Mountains rose and eroded, forests grew and regrew, rivers meandered and carved new paths. These slow transformations reminded humanity that change, though sometimes daunting, was also the source of new beginnings. By embracing this truth, societies found steadiness, not in the absence of motion but in the ability to move with the planet rather than against it. As knowledge expanded, so did a quiet hope that humanity, by aligning its choices with the planet's deep rhythms, could contribute to a future in which both people and ecosystems flourished. On a world defined by continuous transformation, this harmony offered a path toward stability, one built not on resisting the planet's restlessness, but on understanding and honoring it. As societies continued learning from Earth's quiet patterns, a broader understanding emerged, one that linked human history not only to the planet's present rhythms but also to its ancient origins. People began to see that every landscape carried traces of deep time. The minerals in mountains formed in the heat of vanished oceans. The soils beneath forests contained the remains of long-extinct organisms. Even the air held echoes of earlier atmospheres, shaped by life that had transformed the planet over billions of years. This awareness offered a humbling perspective. Humanity was part of a lineage far older than civilization, connected to processes that stretched back to Earth's earliest days. Geology became a way of reading this story. Rocks revealed how continents had collided, split apart, and drifted across the globe. Fossils captured moments when new forms of life appeared after great extinctions. Patterns etched into stone traced the rise and fall of ancient seas. These records showed that Earth had experienced cycles of abundance and scarcity, stability and upheaval, warmth and cold. Each period shaped the diversity of life that followed, guiding evolution along paths that depended as much on the planet's changing surface as on biological innovation. Humanity's own emergence became one chapter in this vast narrative, a consequence of long chains of events spanning millions of years. Understanding these deep histories helped people reinterpret the landscapes they lived in. A quiet valley might once have been the floor of a tropical sea. A broad plain could be the remnant of an ancient glacier's retreat. River deltas revealed how sediments from far inland were carried and deposited over centuries. Even deserts held evidence of wetter climates in the form of hidden lake beds. These realizations gave familiar places new meaning, reminding humanity that Earth's present form was only one stage in an ongoing transformation. Every region carried a memory of what it had been, and a hint of what it might become. This perspective influenced how people approached the future. Instead of assuming that current conditions would remain unchanged, societies began planning with the knowledge that landscapes inevitably evolved. Urban planners considered long-term shifts in coastlines, river paths, and weather patterns. Architects designed structures that could withstand both sudden events and slow environmental trends. Conservationists worked to protect not only species but the ecological relationships that supported resilience across time. These measures reflected a growing awareness that humans lived within a moving system, one that required flexibility, observation, and a willingness to adapt, even when changes unfolded gradually. Cultural traditions absorbed this understanding as well. In many communities, stories began to incorporate themes of geological transformation alongside those of human history. Children learned not only about ancestors but about the ancient processes that shaped the ground beneath their feet. Festivals honored seasonal transitions that echoed cycles far older than civilization. Art depicted both the visible world and the unseen forces, erosion, uplift, sedimentation, that continually reshaped it. This merging of scientific insight with cultural expression deepened the connection between people and the planet, reinforcing the idea that Earth's story and humanity's story were inseparable. The scientific study of Earth's interior added another layer of understanding. Instruments detected vibrations caused by deep seismic waves, revealing structures far beneath the crust. These studies showed that heat from Earth's interior drove the movement of tectonic plates, influenced volcanic activity, and shaped the formation of mountains. It became clear that even the most dramatic surface changes began with subtle shifts deep within the planet. This insight underscored the complexity of Earth's systems and highlighted the importance of humility when interpreting them. The planet's movements were vast and intricate, guided by forces that operated on scales difficult for the human mind to grasp. Despite these challenges, humanity continued to learn, building tools that extended perception far beyond natural limits. Satellites watched the planet from above, sensors measured its vibrations, and computer models simulated its future paths. Each advance brought a clearer picture of Earth as a unified system, one in which oceans, atmosphere, crust, and life interacted continuously. This holistic view supported a deeper sense of responsibility, encouraging societies to make choices that honored the planet's complexity and respected its long-term rhythms. Through all of this, a quiet realization took hold. Earth's restlessness was not merely a physical reality, but a source of meaning. It connected the past to the present to the future, and humanity to the broader web of life. By understanding this motion, people gained insight into their own resilience, creativity, and capacity for adaptation. On a planet shaped by endless transformation, this understanding offered guidance, a reminder that change, when met with awareness and cooperation, could become a pathway to renewal rather than a source of fear. As Earth's long story became clearer, humanity found itself reflecting more deeply on what it meant to live on a planet defined by motion. This reflection grew not out of fear, but out of a growing sense of belonging. People realized that their own lives unfolded within cycles that mirrored those of nature. The rhythms of waking and sleeping, of work and rest, of growth and reflection all echoed the larger patterns of seasons, tides, and shifting light. These parallels created a quiet continuity between the personal and the planetary, inviting individuals to see themselves as participants in an ancient conversation between life and the world that sustained it. Communities began to design spaces that fostered this sense of connection. Homes were built to capture the warmth of morning light or the cooling breezes of evening. Parks and gardens created pockets of calm within cities, where people could observe the slow unfolding of natural cycles. Schools encouraged outdoor learning, helping children recognize the subtle transitions that marked each season. These environments supported well-being by aligning daily life with the rhythms that had guided life on Earth for billions of years. Even small interactions, feeling the air shift before a storm, noticing the return of migrating birds, listening to the rustle of leaves, became reminders of the planet's ongoing motion. This awareness influenced how societies approached moments of uncertainty. When landscapes changed, or weather patterns shifted, or challenges emerged, people drew on the understanding that Earth itself had navigated countless transitions. The planet had experienced mass extinctions, long ice ages, and sudden warming events, yet life continued, adapting, diversifying, and renewing itself. This perspective offered comfort and perspective, showing that resilience was not a single act but a continuous process shaped by curiosity, cooperation, and the willingness to evolve. The scientific community continued to deepen humanity's understanding of this resilience. Advances in genetics revealed how species carried traces of ancient adaptations within their DNA. Studies of ecological networks showed how the health of an entire system depended on the strength of its connections. Research on climate cycles illuminated how changes in one part of the world influenced outcomes far away. These discoveries shifted the focus from isolated problems to interconnected solutions, revealing that the path to stability often lay in supporting the relationships that bound systems together. Philosophies of living began to incorporate these insights. People spoke more often of stewardship, of care, of honoring the landscapes that shaped their identities. Traditions that celebrated the turning of seasons, the arrival of rains, or the blooming of certain plants found renewed meaning. These rituals highlighted the beauty of change and encouraged patience during difficult periods. They also served as reminders that humans had always adapted, through stories, knowledge, and shared experience, to the world's shifting conditions. In embracing these traditions, communities found both grounding and inspiration. Art continued to explore the relationship between humanity and the planet. Painters depicted coastlines shaped by waves older than civilization. Musicians composed works inspired by the rhythms of wind or water. Writers captured the feeling of walking through ancient forests or standing beneath vast skies filled with stars. These creative expressions offered perspectives that science alone could not provide, emotional connections that deepened appreciation for Earth's complexity and encouraged reflection on humanity's place within it. Even as challenges persisted, rising seas, shifting climates, and evolving ecosystems, there was a growing sense that humanity could face these transformations with wisdom guided by understanding. The planet's history demonstrated that change was not a departure from normalcy, but a defining feature of Earth itself. By studying these patterns, societies learned how to anticipate shifts, adapt with purpose, and strengthen the systems that supported both people and nature. As evening settled and the natural world quieted, these insights offered a calming reassurance. The same rhythms that shaped tides and forests also shaped the human experience. Breath slowed, thoughts softened, and the body followed its natural inclination toward rest. Within this calm, there was a sense of continuity, a recognition that sleep, like all cycles on Earth, was not an interruption but a renewal. It echoed the planet's own capacity to pause, restore, and begin again. On a world defined by motion, the quiet moments became anchors, helping individuals feel at home in a universe where change was the most enduring constant. In the quiet hours of the evening, when the world settles into stillness, humanity's connection to Earth becomes easier to feel. The pulse of daily activity slows, mirroring the gradual rhythms that shape landscapes, climates, and the flow of life across the planet. In this calm, it becomes clear that every moment of rest, every pause, is part of a pattern older than any civilization. Just as forests reset after each season and ocean currents renew themselves through their steady circulations, the human mind and body follow cycles of effort and release. This gentle alignment with the planet's natural motions offers comfort, reminding individuals that they are part of a world shaped not by permanence, but by continuity. As people reflect on their place within these vast rhythms, a deeper understanding emerges, one that blends humility with gratitude. Earth has moved through countless transformations, yet it has nurtured life with remarkable consistency. It has weathered impacts from space, shifts in climate, and changes in its own interior, continually offering environments where new possibilities can take shape. Humanity's story has unfolded within these spaces, influenced by the tilt of the planet, the circulation of oceans, the uplift of mountains, and the patterns of wind and rain. Recognizing this interdependence encourages a quieter, more thoughtful relationship with the world, one rooted in awareness rather than certainty. This awareness inspires a commitment to care. People restore forests not only for the oxygen they produce, but for the memory they contain of ancient cycles. They protect coastlines because they understand the delicate balance between land and sea. They cherish rivers that carry nutrients across continents, linking distant ecosystems into a single living network. These acts are more than solutions to environmental challenges. They are expressions of belonging. They acknowledge that the planet's restlessness is not something to oppose, but something to accompany with respect and intention. Even technologies begin to reflect this shift in perspective. Cities integrate green roofs that cool the air and absorb rain. Buildings capture sunlight and wind to create steady, renewable energy. Transportation systems follow routes that minimize disruption to landscapes and wildlife. These innovations arise not from controlling nature, but from learning to move with it. They reveal a future in which human creativity strengthens rather than strains the systems that support life. On a personal scale, this understanding brings a sense of peace. Knowing that Earth's transformations unfold across millions of years helps place individual challenges in perspective. Seasons change, landscapes shift, and life adapts. These patterns have guided existence since the earliest days. As the body settles into rest, breath slowing to the planet's quiet tempo, there is reassurance in recognizing that stillness is part of a larger cycle. Sleep becomes not an escape from the world's motion, but a harmonious part of it, a nightly renewal that mirrors the gentle patterns found everywhere in nature. The night deepens, winds soften. The sky stretches across continents just as it always has. And in this vast, steady darkness, there is space for reflection, calm, and restoration. Earth continues its slow turning beneath the stars, carrying with it the memories of ancient oceans, drifting continents, evolving species, and the countless generations who have walked its surface. To live on such a planet is to share in its story, a story of movement, resilience, and quiet beauty. As you rest now, you do so on a world shaped by billions of years of transformation, a world that continues to support life with unwavering patience. Let its rhythms guide you gently into sleep, just as they have guided every creature that has ever lived here. We, from Sleepy Stories, wish you a good night.